Happy Friday. It's George Brockler with you here on the George Show, 710 KNUS. Today's going to be a nice one. It's 50 degrees. That's what they've been saying all along at Denver 7's Weather Voodoo Cabal. Tomorrow, however, they've downgraded it from 55 to 53. That's okay because on the back end, which is really the front of next week when I'm not here to enjoy it, the weather people have decided that every day will be 5 degrees warmer than they thought it would be just yesterday. So Monday 52, Tuesday 50, Wednesday light snow and rain at 47 degrees. So pretty mild, decent Colorado week headed for us now. The lowest temperature I see is predicted for next week, Thursday, 38 degrees. But you know how it goes with these weather people. That number will change to 97 and then back down to 70, then 20, then into the 40s, all within the next week. I won't be here in the saddle. I'll be here on the radio. I won't be here in Denver Monday through Wednesday. I'll be down in a place called El Paso, Texas, in some ways the armpit of America, just based on the shape. I don't mean that in any other negative way. And we'll be down there highlighting what we can about the immigration catastrophe that's taking place down south. Billy working diligently to continue to lock up folks to talk about it. We'll get some folks there and some folks here, really trying to impress upon, I think, the community, the impact that illegal immigration has right here in the metro area for us and frankly, the broader state of Colorado. So we'll be focusing a lot on that all next week. Now, Deb will be down there, and, you know, Deb's show is 3 to 4 each day. Deb will be down there Tuesday through Thursday, I think, maybe Monday through Thursday. And then Stefan, I think, is permanently relocating there. I think Stefan is moving there. That's why he was trying to convert my name to Jorge. He was trying to get in the bilingual mode. But Stefan will be down there, I believe, Monday through Friday. And so we'll be covering that. So you'll hear us. There won't be any change in the sound for you, but I just won't be sitting here enjoying all of this nice weather with y'all that we're going to have. I haven't even looked to see what the weather's going to be like in El Paso. I presume there's snow all around. I'm kidding. It is the southern part of Texas. Now, in terms of what to expect moving forward here, there is a lot in the news. Now, yesterday was actually kind of, listen, when you're no longer the district attorney, and I haven't been for some time now, and you're in that post-pandemic world, you lose time in just the worst possible ways. And you may be experiencing this as well. I was on a number of phone and Zoom calls. And, you know, you're kind of conditioned to think in your mind, that's not a very big deal. How much time can that take? It was the entire day. After I left here, it just disappeared. Now, in between, I was asked at the last minute because Eric Sonderman took a little bit ill. Eric Sonderman guy, political reporter kind of guy, columnist guy for, I think it's Colorado Politics. And I think he also does the Gazette, great writer. And he's been around forever. He took sick. And so at the last minute, I was asked to come join the Colorado Inside Out folks off of PBS 12. That show is going to air today. And we were talking about a whole bunch of things, including Senator Barb Kirkmeyer's bill, which it was weird because when you watch it, you'll see that both Jesse Paul from The Sun and I are struggling to couch it in the terms that would make it relevant for when the show airs today. Is it the bill was killed or the bill will be killed? Don't know. But that's how it played out yesterday, at least on TV. And then once again, I had a Beau Visage spa moment with the word proliferation. And there was something about the word proliferation, and I don't know if they're going to play it on the video or not, but I Beau Visaged it right there. And I was like, prolifer, and I stopped and I looked, and I go, it's just the one word, right? Proliferation. And then Jesse Paul had another P word. I'm like, is it proliferation? Are you trying to say proliferation? So, and then I totally botched. This is my appearance on TV, folks. I totally botched the end segment where we're supposed to do one bad thing and one good thing that happened throughout the week. I did both at once. And so Kyle Dyer, who's just the nicest person in the world, was just so gentle. And she's like, well, okay, well, you got that. We're going to give you a chance to do another positive thing. I didn't have another positive thing other than to say, mercifully, this segment's about to end. That was it. And so that may be my last appearance. I don't know. I don't know if they'll tolerate me again. That may be my last appearance. But you go check it out at Colorado Inside Out. The other thing to check out are the ways to communicate with the show. Now, we have this fancy YouTube channel that's up running right now. And if you go to it, you'll see I'm not sporting a lid today. I really can't tell you why. I'm just not. But if you go on there and you subscribe, and you have to subscribe to do it. If you subscribe, you get to comment and see the comments of the other folks that are on there. We had some stuff back on. And here's a floating subscribe button right in the corner of the screen. I don't know if I'm pointing in the right. No, it's over here by this corner right there. The lower button. Do that. And then if you can get us over the magic number that Mark Crowley has set, I can stop begging you to subscribe. And then we can start to have more and more and more of these conversations.
Start feeding us again. It's nice.
It would be nice. I mean, Fridays, I saw some, this is,
leftovers.
Again, there's no chance management is out of bed listening to the radio. No. If they're out of bed, they're not listening to the radio. Not. But if you look at the food that's on the table, Billy, back in the little break room, that's food we had 2 days ago for the meeting. I don't know if you saw that, but it looked vaguely familiar. Still, I'm sure very delicious, very moist.
I'm sure, no salmonella at all.
No. And I don't know if certain of those items can go bad given their content, but
I think that honestly, the people that are here during the regular part of the day do that on purpose to us. They do that to taunt us, to say, look at the deliciousness we enjoyed. You suck.
I just wonder
that's how I'm taking it personally.
I wonder what else though they're doing during the day. Like after we've done the heavy lifting,
it's a lot of eating. Whatever it ends up on the table, there's a lot of eating that goes on.
I mean, do they get like steak sandwiches and
I would assume
some sort of tasty, crispy fritters? And then all we get stuck with is
I imagine there's some sort of like personal chef that comes in and cooks for them.
Oh, you know what? That would would be just like the day people. I'm sure that's it. I wonder if it's all gone by the time Stefan rolls in here.
I bet they save stuff for him because they like him better. Again, it's just a personal interpretation based on the stuff they leave behind for us.
Yeah, the scraps.
Yeah.
Right. There's a real breakdown there.
My favorite is when it has dairy and they leave it out all night. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes.
Was that supposed to be cream?
When I eat it, my lips tingle.
This is good. Yes. The butter has a beard.
Yeah.
A green beard. That's so wonderful.
Very St. Patrick's Day.
The other way to get in touch with us, of course, is the YouTubes. But also the text messages. You can get us right here on text. People are doing it all the time. We've even had a little exchange going back and forth before I even got into the studio on here. So we know it works. This is the kind of thing that you want to get done early. So if you have not yet texted into the show, do it. Go to the app, download it if you don't have it, because honestly, the radio sounds better over your app. Or you can go to 710knus.com right there if you're sitting at your monitor. And there's a way to text the show live. We get it in here. And if you've listened to the show for more than 5 minutes, you know that I respond. I'll read many of them on air. And that, frankly, that is the best part of this show, is the interaction with you, the listeners. Yes, we have guests for today. Yes, we'll talk about current event stuff. But honestly, I would be bored silly if it was just me vomiting at the mouth. And I'm capable of doing that, as you know, because I am a licensed attorney here in the state of Colorado. But I am much more interested in talking with my neighbors, the other fellas and fellettes from the community, and sort of getting your opinion and challenge each other, right? I mean, that's just how it works. So today, Friday, make it your day to engage, see how it goes. Here's another one. It just came in. I'm going to prove it. Texting 123. Do you have a copy? Nope, didn't get it. No chance at all. And I'm typing that in right now. Nope, did not get it. But you join them as well. Now, some of the other things I wanted to update you on news-wise, and this is not anything. I don't know what Billy has in store for us for You Choose the News or the Thorpe Report. So if I step on your toes at all, Billy, please forgive me.
Okay.
There's a grand jury in Georgia. Were you going to talk about that one?
No, because I'll only do local stuff with the.
Okay, good. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So yeah, you can do the other stuff.
I love that. The Georgia grand jury down there that has been impaneled by Fannie Willis, she's the Fulton County District Attorney, and it's been going on forever. They have come back with a report or some recommendations. This is odd to me, by the way, that they've done this, but they came back with some recommendations for perjury indictments, or recommend perjury indictments in the Trump election probe that's taken place. Now, I want to be sure everyone knows the president did not testify at all in front of the grand jury, so he is not one of the people being considered for any of the perjury charges. But those that did, some of them The grand jury is suggesting, and they've been impaneled since last May. I mean, that's a long time for a grand jury to be handling one particular case. I'm just saying that's a big, big deal. That they've recommended perjury charges against some. And the way it's phrased is the part that gets me a little uncomfortable. A Georgia grand jury looking into possible election meddling by former President Trump said, quote, one or more witnesses may have lied under oath and urged prosecutors to pursue criminal indictments in those cases. What's weird is a grand jury doesn't encourage someone to pursue criminal indictments. They actually do the damn indictment, right? Like they do it. So it's weird the way this article and
I think I know why.
Why? What's going on?
Only because I consume a lot of really weird things, and there was
tell
something
me.
that was said yesterday in a conversation I heard between some people that I was listening to online while I was doing some other stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's a lot.
it was I know it's and I'm not sure I can eloquently or accurately portray the information, but
that shouldn't keep you from trying, my man. We're on air.
It hasn't ever stopped me before. If you listen to the show, you know that doesn't stop me at all. That there are, at least in this point, or whatever the procedure is, there were 2 levels of grand juries, at least in Georgia, that this is some sort of a super investigative grand jury. I don't know. I mean, I'm making that up.
I get it.
But
I get
it's some sort of a bigger overarching grand jury. And then what they have to do is the DA actually has to now go
and
to
panel a
regular one, and then bring them what the first one found and say, shall we indict, and get them to indict, which again seems extraneous. Seems why did we just start with the one that can say indict? Why did we start with the big one?
I guess
I don't know the process.
The thing you worry about is a runaway grand jury.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay, that was how it was explained to me. The fact that it kicked in when you said that. I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Because of the length in which they were impaneled, and they said it was unusual to be impaneled this long, but it's because it's some sort of super grand jury.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know what it is.
Maybe they just told them, hey, the focus of your investigation is to get information on the election fraud stuff. I'm still not convinced they couldn't have indicted on their own, because there are very limitations on the grand jury. But maybe that's the route they're following. Is they were told, hey, if it's not directly related to election fraud, but instead related to what they did to you, that's something separate.
Yeah, it could be.
And
so they do have to have a second grand jury now before they can get to charges.
Well, and most jurisdictions of Fulton County size have standing grand juries that exist for all sorts of crimes throughout, and they usually are impaneled for about 1 year. In fact, almost exactly 1 year, unless they have to be extended for some reason. So maybe that's it, is that this special grand jury was told, if you think you have something on election fraud, you take action. If you think you have something on something else, let us know, and we'll go do our due diligence in front of somebody else. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, well, seemed weird.
That's and that makes a lot of sense, Billy. Thanks. That is the recommendation, of course.
I'm gonna write that down, because that doesn't happen very often. Of
the grand jury. Something else that has taken place, there's an appellate court down there in Arizona, and it has decided that Kari Lake has no further appeals left for them, and they ruled against her on her fight to undo the election outcome from Arizona. So it looks like that thing, at least for now, is over. She lost her appeal in the governor challenge race. And that doesn't mean it's the end. I imagine she could, because this was the Arizona Court of Appeals, I imagine she could go to the Supreme Court. So that door is still ajar. And, the Supreme Court's not a rubber stamp for the Court of Appeals. We've seen that in a whole bunch of other states. And so Kari Lake has already said, I'm going to go to the Arizona Supreme Court. And this is just a step along the way. So who knows? It doesn't mean that issue is over. It just means another loss along the way. And really all you care about is what the final result is. I don't know if there is a further U.S. Supreme Court appeal to this. I would doubt it, because it sounds like it's an Arizona law issue, an Arizona Constitution issue, and the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't get to interpret those things unless there's a federal question. So I don't know if that's where it ends, but there are still many, many months. I can't see the Supreme Court coming out with a decision, let alone oral argument on it, for some time. So for those of you that are tracking that, that's what's going on. There's something else that you might be interested in called the U.S. national debt. There is a report out that we are on track to hit $50 trillion 1 decade from now. $50 trillion. folks, we can't hit $50 trillion and still continue to exist as we have. I mean, that's no overstatement. That is like fiscal Armageddon, because for those of you that are out there living on Social Security checks in part, or those of you who want to, that is unsustainable. I mean, we already know that 10 years from now, the Social Security Trust Fund is going to be on its knees. I don't know how we continue to fund a military in 10 years. If you're China and you're playing the long game, and that's the only game they know how to play very well, you're just sitting back and letting us kill ourselves with all this mounting debt. And there's been reports that have come out that have made it pretty clear that while it added to the debt, it isn't the sole reason. And in fact, it isn't even the biggest reason for this. And that is there were the tax relief that President Trump has been blamed for $7 trillion. It turns out that another $3.1 trillion instead is attributable to just within the last year. The good, smart folks in D.C. have ratcheted up our national debt $3.1 trillion over the last year, not attributable to the Trump tax cuts, instead really attributable to the COVID relief funds, the Inflation Relief Act, the whatever those things have. That's what they've got going on. So it's scary. I listened to this podcast on it, and it's really pretty freaking scary, because if we don't get spending under control, and we can no longer say Democrat spending, because Republicans, man, they're at the trough as much as anyone. And frankly, the person I know who has been the most hawkish on trying to keep debt down is Ken Buck. My congressman out there in CD4. We need more people like that, because the spending has gotten cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and it's going to crush us.
And you're exactly right that both. And the thing is, I have a problem with the deficit and the talking about it, because I don't believe either side actually cares. I believe both sides use it as a talking point to try to get things that they want, but neither side at the core cares. And the reason I submit that is because during both parties, no matter who's in power, the deficit goes up, and goes up somewhat significantly. And oddly enough, in the last couple of cycles that we've seen, the debt has increased more under Republican administrations than it has under Democrat administrations, which seems counterintuitive and seems counter to everything they are telling us. But that is basically what is happening. Both sides are writing checks that we have to pay for, and we can't at this point. But I do not see the spine on either side of the aisle that has the fortitude to make the cuts necessary. Everybody's just going to use as a cudgel to get their political game and to put political points forward, but nobody's actually serious about it. I don't believe that there is a single person in Congress that is 110% serious about making cuts. I applaud Ken Buck, and you're all right. He is at the forefront of many of the right things that we should be doing, but I still question that any of them are really, really interested in cutting the deficit, because I do not see any sort of motivation to do it.
Nope, I agree, man. This may be the only opportunity to really use that. And I know you hate this, but it's the only tool they have in their bag, is this debt ceiling thing, where apparently we're going to hit it sometime in June of this year. And McCarthy has said, hey, we want to use this to try to convince the White House to help us lock down some spending cuts. And of course, Biden has said no. And so I don't know what's going to happen in June. We may rush up to that period of time.
The problem I've got with holding the deficit limit hostage is these are checks that we've already written. These are promises that we have already made. And the question I have is, if this is the only time that you can get spending cuts, what are you doing during appropriations? What are you possibly doing? Because that is the time in which this money is allocated. If you're telling me we can only cut after we have agreed to spend, that's stupid. You wouldn't let that. I mean, you wouldn't take that from your kids. You wouldn't your business partner.
Yeah.
You wouldn't take that from your accountant. You wouldn't take that from your bank, and you for darn sure wouldn't take that as a policy for your own family budget. So why in the world do we think that it is applicable or even okay to do this? It is appropriations. That is when we decide to spend the money. And if you can't figure it out during appropriations, you're doing your job poorly. Let somebody else do it.
I'm anxious to see if they're able to get some headway here, because as it turns out, at least prior to this Congress, the prior Congresses, Republican or Democrat, seem like they're just spendthrifts, man. They just want to continue to bust through taxpayer money. We're at over 100% of GDP as debt. The last two times we were at that, it was coming out. It was 1944 and 1945. It was coming out of World War II. Now, we're there now, and we're not spending to come out of a war. I mean, we've lost the ability to do it. One last story before we cut away and then get back to the good stuff. It's now national news, folks, for Denver, not in a good way. No, this isn't a crime one, and I know that's shocking to you. There's a city council member named Chris Hines. And oh yeah, I'm supposed to do this too, folks. Let me do this before I get to this story. Sorry. This is Friday. This means you get to chime in on the You Choose the News. Please, please do this, because last time it turned out to be you guys had some great taste. Here are the Billy, you want me to read this or you want to read this?
Yeah, you go ahead, sir. You have the list.
Here are the 4 You Choose the News titles. You pick the one that we're going to do first. In fact, we'll just have them roll in the order of your voting. Number 1, giving him the old number 2. 2, a Lacey dilemma. 3, a tale of 2 Sydneys. 4, is honesty the best policy? I say again, giving him the old number 2, a Lacey dilemma, a tale of 2 Sydneys. Is honesty the best policy? You text it in, tube text it in, or whatever. We'll rank order them by the time we come back. I should have done that at the beginning of the show, Billy. Why didn't you just scream at me when I did that? Because that's exactly how this thing has to go. But I want to tell you about Chris Hines. Chris Hines, he's not a Republican guy. He's a Democrat guy. But this story has nothing to do with politics, and it has everything to do with dignity, and it has everything to do with a city that continues to act like it's just a clown car in terms of getting things done. So Chris Hines, member of Denver City Council, an elected official, is asked to come and participate in this community discussion about an upcoming municipal election. I think it was the mayor's race. And they have it, I think, at Cleo Wallace. And of course, Cleo Wallace is so old, they don't have to, doesn't mean they can't, they don't have to have ADA accommodations. So they don't. Turns out Chris Hines is paralyzed from the chest down. And he has a wheelchair. It's a big one. It's a 400-pounder. I'm looking at it on video right now. And by the way, this has made the Washington Post. Congratulations, Denver. And I've seen this wheelchair. This is one that my
is awful. It's awful.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
I've seen this wheelchair. I saw it yesterday when my son was going to try them out. And they make this guy climb up onto the stage in order to get to the chairs and the water and all this stuff.
It is disgusting. He shows up and they say, "Oh, we didn't know you were in a wheelchair."
Yeah.
Pardon?
We didn't
me?
know you, the elected official who we invited, was in a wheelchair.
How do you not know that one of your guests is in a wheelchair? How do you not know that? And you know what their solution was? This is how insulting it is. You know what their solution was? "Oh, we can just get some people to pick up the chair and put you in the chair on the stage." No,
it's 400 pounds.
Yes,
by the way. That's huge.
You're not going to be picking that up, and you're going to have Chris inside there. You think you guys are going to be able to pick him up, take him up the chair? That's going to be 600 pounds. You're going to drop him. You're putting him in danger because of your poor planning and because you were ignorant. And again, some of these people that were involved in this were those squishy liberal types.
Oh man,
those people that want to hug, that tell us we have to look at the disabilities and we have to make all these accommodations, and that we are rude people if we don't take this into account. And it's them that did some of this. I'm glad you brought this up, because I had a hard time. I don't have it in the news, and it pissed me off. And that's the reason I didn't put it in the news, because I was going to go off too much.
Yeah, buddy, it pisses me off like nothing else here. If probably mostly because of my son and what we go through, but the lack of dignity and in watching this video of him trying to crawl up onto the stage and scoot his way over, and man, it's heartbreaking to watch a man have to go through that.
Imagine you are supposed to be on stage for a debate, and they tell you that every one of the rest of your competitors, everybody else on the stage, gets to walk, but you have to crawl on the stage.
And to have not known it.
Really?
I mean, my hope is someone's been fired here. Like, this isn't a oops. Like, I don't get it. And I hope that Cleo Wallace takes some of the jillions of bucks that keep getting dumped into it, and they start thinking in terms of maybe we need to retrofit this thing. Not that we have to, but maybe we ought to. Maybe that's the thing we ought to do. We can call it the Chris Hines ramp or something.
Maybe it is the kind, understanding thing to do, which is what we're always lectured about from the other side. Maybe you take into account everybody and make it accessible for everybody rather than standing outside and going to protest and putting up signs and telling everybody else how they're wrong. Maybe you need to put what you say into action. I'm pissed.
I don't get it. It was really infuriating. Frankly, maybe we have Chris Hines on. I don't know if he's willing to throw punches, but he got interviewed by the Washington Post and said he felt like a circus monkey. And I thought, man, why would you do that to another human being? I don't know. It's just, it's infuriating, but it's Denver, folks. That's Denver. It's not like it couldn't happen somewhere else. It just seems like Denver is a dumpster fire right now on a whole lot of different levels. I watched the debate last night on Channel 9, offered Andy Rougeau the opportunity to come on today and answer Kyle's questions as if he'd been in the debate, but man, that dude's too busy running around trying to get elected. Let me say this, though. The people that I watched on there, had we not interviewed Kwame, I still would have come out of that debate liking this guy, because this guy says things that the other candidates, I think, are too scared to say. Like, he comes right out and talks about we need to start enforcing laws. Nobody on that stage of the other 12 that were allowed to be on there because they take taxpayer funds, none of those 12 said that. Some of them talked about increasing the number of police. Some of them talked about decreasing it. I heard Leslie Herod say on there that she and Brittany Pedersen and someone else went to Van City up there to Vancouver to check out the safe injection sites, and they work. That clip ought to be saved for Stefan's show. She said they work, and what we saw were these safe injection sites where there were drug treatment places right above them, and what they found is when people are able to get their drugs, they're more inclined to seek help. And I just, in my mind, if there's statistics to prove that, I got to see it. In my mind, I pictured someone shooting up and then meandering upstairs to ask, hey, now that I'm high, how do I just stop doing this? I can't picture that, but maybe it works. And by the way, having been in Vancouver as recently as 1 year ago this month, I can tell you that safe injection site is not working. I had been in Vancouver some years before over spring break with 3 of the kids, and we had been on the street called Hastings Street. By the way, Vancouver, beautiful city, really beautiful city. We had been there on Hastings Street looking for this one particular restaurant, and it was, there were some homeless people around there for sure. A year ago, there were homeless people. It was like a scene out of World War Z. The number of just lost souls crammed onto the sides of the streets, keeping businesses from opening. Most of them had been shuttered, just lining block after block after block. The humanity, the just wasted humanity. It was awful. I don't understand why anybody owns property over there. Maybe they don't. The restaurant that we had been to just a few years before was shuttered, spray paint all over the sliding door. I mean, I don't know, folks, but that's what the mayor candidates want to bring to Denver, apparently, is that. But I thought Kwame Spearman really acquitted himself well. I would have loved to have seen Andy up there and the answers that he might have given. But if you don't have the stomach to watch it, we'll try to figure out if there are some things worth grabbing up and getting on here. And of course, all that other stuff. Listen, we've got to cut away for a break because Big Daddy just rambled through a whole bunch of minutes that we owe to someone else. I want to say this again before we cut away. Do your voting now. There's give them the old number 2. That's number 1. A Lacey dilemma, number 2. A tale of 2 Sydneys. That's number 3. We've already got some votes for that. And is honesty the best policy? Is honesty the best policy? Other votes coming in right now. You can do it off of the tube text, off of the regular text. I wish I could tell you phone calls. I don't think we're doing the phone calls on this one. When we come back, we'll do the Thorpe Report and you choose the news. Stick around. It's the Friday edition of the George Show, 710 KNUS. love them at Thanksgiving. That's the Cranberries. If you're listening to the podcast, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's Linger from the Cranberries. George Brockler, 710 KNUS. Let me do one last little pass through this. I'm going to announce this again. I'll keep doing the tallies as they come in on the texts and the tube texts. Texts really taking off. The tube texts are doing well. They just need to get a few more bumps in there. But here's the deal. For the You Choose the News at the final segment of the hour here, giving them the old number 2. You vote, by the way. You get to vote, and we will read them in that order. And by we, I mean Billy. Giving him the old number 2. That's number 1. Number 2 is a Lacey dilemma. Number 3, a tale of 2 Sydneys. And number 4 is honesty the best policy? You vote, we read. Now it's time for the good stuff. The Thorpe Report with William Thorpe.
Hey, good morning, sir. And our Moffat County Sheriff's Office has rescued 19 people and a dog when they became stranded along a highway during blizzard conditions earlier in the week. It happened on Wednesday. The Sheriff's Office had closed Highway 40 between Craig and the Colorado-Utah state line due to the blizzard conditions. They had wind gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour. Moffat County Search and Rescue was called to the area to assist multiple stranded motorists in the area. They used the snowcat and got 19 people and a dog. They were transported to Maybell Community Center.
What's
where they were
the dog
taken.
Doing?
I know. Hopefully not driving.
No, well, not this time.
Yeah,
Do you remember Toonces, the
Yes,
driving
Toonces.
cat?
I had a friend that named his cat Toonces.
That is such a wonderful skit. You should YouTube that right after you watch our show.
Oh, it's there are otherwhere. I'd like to buy a vowel, please, Vanna. Okay.
I think it's proliferate.
Yeah, exactly. Or Bovisage. A man who fatally shot a 12-year-old auto theft suspect is not going to face criminal charges, according to the Denver District Attorney's Office. Yeah, Carolyn Tyler, public information officer, said the office concluded it would not be able to meet their ethical obligation of proving any charges guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the one where the guy had his car stolen. He was following it through an app. He tracked down his car, and then when he approached, people inside started shooting. He shot back and killed a 12-year-old.
Okay, hold on. That press release is weak.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree.
This is a guy who unequivocally shot and killed that kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was acting on self-defense. Now, that DA's office could have come out and said the evidence suggests that we can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt because he acted in self-defense. To simply suggest that, it leaves open the idea that, man, we'd like to get him, but we just can't get him. It's like, come on, man.
I'm glad you
clear
noticed
this
that.
Dude.
Yeah, the fact that they didn't mention self-defense. They were like, and I'm just like, they shot first.
They shot first.
Sorry.
End of story.
Yeah. That's it.
Shot first. I don't get how the DA's office is. I think this is political too. They're so skittish about the crazy lefties out there that they can't say this guy acted in self-defense. Instead, it's, we just can't get there from here.
Yeah, exactly. Because they'll say, but he chased down the car and he went up to the no, it was his car.
Clear the dude. Clear the dude.
Oh. A man was found shot to death in an open field in Thornton on Thursday morning. Thornton Police Department received a call around 6:30 in the morning to check on a person in an open field. It was around the 500 block of East 168th Avenue. When they arrived, they found a man with a gunshot wound laying on the ground. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The identity is being withheld until they can contact next of kin, and they're asking for anybody that has information to contact them. Elsewhere, 4 men and 2 juveniles were accused of carjacking 2 people at gunpoint in Denver's Cherry Creek area last month. Very interesting. But of course, they just wanted to sleep in the car. That's what we heard.
That's right.
Yeah. January 23rd, officers with DPD responded to the parking lot of East 2nd Avenue and University Boulevard for a report of a robbery. Police were told by the victims they parked and a group of males surrounded the vehicle, told them to get out. Then they were pulled out of the vehicle at gunpoint and hit about the head and shoulders with pistolas.
It sounds like, too, that the DA's office has charged them with COCA counts, organized crime counts.
Yeah.
That's a big hammer. That's an F2. It's not a crime of violence. So I think it's an 8. I'm guessing now because I haven't looked in a while. I think it's 8 to 24 year potential sentence. I don't even think it's mandatory. But that tells me there's something more going on than your typical conspiracy or or complicity theory between the 4. Saying COCA tells me
6 total. They've got 6 total people arrested.
Yeah,
now.
Then
all under 21 as well.
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
I thought as they were arrested in the backyard nearby, but they got 6 all under 21, and that's interesting. You're right, talking about the organized
I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, maybe they're involved in more. Maybe they were suspects in.
Maybe there's a ring of these things.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And finally, Home Goods Store Tuesday morning plans to close 265 stores, including 16 of them here in Colorado. It's part of a bankruptcy filing. They filed for bankruptcy on Tuesday. The closures are going to be covering more than half of their available stores. They're going to try to close the least profitable ones while attempts to reorganize continue. The 16 Tuesday morning stores include locations in Denver, Colorado Springs, Littleton, Castle Rock, Fort Collins, Longmont, Wheat Ridge, Johnstown, Sheridan, Grand Junction, Silverthorne, Parker, Northwind, and Pueblo. So basically, yeah, they're all going away. Yeah.
That's an unemployment killer right there.
Yeah, that hurts. And it's also the thing for me is it is a based on price point, it hurts the lower economic rungs. Those are discount shoppers. And they have good deals, but that also is I think that's somewhat of an impact that those discount shoppers aren't going out and buying, goods and services as well. So, oh well. All right, we should take a break and then you'll choose the news in a bit.
Yes, and we'll give you one last chance to vote, folks. I'm going to do it again here, giving them the old number 2. If you want to vote for this story as number 1, the first thing that Billy does with You Choose the News, you got to text in now, either on the YouTube or, damn it, I did it again. I'm going to get another memo, either on YouTube or off of the regular text from the app or the website. Number 1, giving them the old number 2. Number 2, a Lacey dilemma. Number 3, a tale of two Sydneys. And number 4 is honesty, the best policy. I'll make it easy for you, folks. If you can't do the numbers, we're going to start with the old Lacey, Sydney, honesty. Those are the ones you can type in. We'll know what you're talking about. Listen, I got to cut away for a break here, but when we come back, we'll get to the juicy stuff. This is the dessert. This is the pudding after the meat. George Brockler on the George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
George Brockler right back with you here, 710 KNUS. The You Choose the News on Fridays is driven by you. Obviously, all the creativity comes from Billy, but you choose the order in which they're done, going off of the participation from YouTube. And for the texter who keeps encouraging me to say the YouTube, I'll say it one more time before I'm fired, the YouTube. And off of the text that we have received, here is the order in which they will go. Billy.
Yes, sir.
Oh, don't you have to play the music?
Oh, you want to do?
We got to do the music. Right?
I'll do the introduction here. Give me the order.
Oh, here's the order.
Give me the
A
order.
Lacy Dilemma.
Okay, so that's the first one. Okay.
Tale of Two Sydneys.
Okay.
And then we have a tie between the old number 2 and Honesty. That's a tough one.
That means you will have to cast the tie-breaking vote, but don't do it yet, sir.
I'll wait.
We want to make sure that we amp up the anticipation and the anxiety. And are you going to hear the story you want? Yes, because if there's nothing, we're full of a lot of gas, especially me. It's much.
Yeah,
all right. Well, that means it is time. Oh, it is time once again. Where on Friday we get to play You Choose the News. And yes, you have helped us out by choosing the stories and the order in which we will read them to you. We have scoured the interwebs to find really, really stupid stories today and giving them some really ridiculous headlines to play this fake radio news game. Why? Well, because they continue to pay us for it. And yes, today we are sponsored by one of Mr. Wizard's home science experiments. Yes, find out some of the wonders you can discover while sitting around at home with regular household objects. We'll tell you how in just a few minutes. But first, we must play the game. Alrighty, thanks to our listeners. Here is our headline and story number 1, a Lacy dilemma. Here we are going to be talking about how sometimes women are getting their shorts changed.
What? I'm sorry?
See what I did there? Now, the average U.S. tariff is a little bit different for things that women buy than men buy. So yes, if you are going to the store and you're going to buy yourself a brand new pair of boxers, tidy whities, jockey briefs,
do it all the time.
Even that very special birthday thong that George is fond of, you will actually end up paying an 11% tariff on some of those goods. However, if you're going to buy something for that love of your life, the special woman, something lacy, or maybe just something for yourself on those quiet nights with a glass of wine on Friday, your women's undergarments will cost you a 15% tariff.
Where?
Women, just in the U.S., imported goods that are coming across, that are coming into America, are underwear. Women pay a 35% greater tariff or tax on them.
That's garbage.
Yes. Now, here's the weird part about it, though, is you will pay a higher tariff based on the lower quality of the underoos that you're buying. For some reason, how the tariff structure is working is that the lower the quantity and the lower the quality of the goods, the higher the tariff rate. It can get up to 35 or 40% on some of the lower cost bloomers. But if you go for something that is well done and very, very lacy and somewhat see-through, for some reason, the tariff on that is a little bit less. So I'm just saying, treat yourself. Silk underwear is taxed at just 2%, but cotton is around a 6 or 7% at times. So again, I'm just saying, when you're going to do that, treat yourself.
Material matters.
The best.
Material matters.
You deserve the best.
That's treat yourself. I think that's what makes it less expensive for that birthday thong, which I affectionately call the gherkin hammock.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, it has that propeller on the front. It's
the only reason to get it. Yes. That's the only reason I walk quickly through the house.
Yeah.
You know,
it makes a noise too. Okay. Oh, enough of that. Okay. Our second story today, thanks to you, the listeners, a tale of two Sydneys. Yes, we're going to talk to a New York man, 62-year-old Kingsley Burnett, who said it was his dream of an idyllic Australian getaway. He basically wanted to go and visit Australia. He had been saving his money. He had planned his trip. He was going to take a cruise that was leaving from Australia, spend about a week going around the area, and then come back, spend a few more days in the lovely country. So he recently bound a plane. And when he landed, he noticed something was a little wrong. There are mountains, and it's cold.
Wait, what?
Really, really cold. And also, it didn't quite take as long as he thought it was going to fly all the way to Australia.
Should have used Waze. Well, he used Apple Maps, didn't he?
Because instead of flying to Sydney, Australia, he flew to Sydney, Montana.
No.
Yes, he reportedly...
Oh, come on. Revoke that license, man.
He he reportedly got confused based on the acronyms of the airport when he was booking his ticket. See, SYD is Sydney, SDY is the Montana Sydney.
I bet he was excited too. Like, wait a minute, this is only $200.
He did.
I'm going to Sydney for $200.
In the interview, he said he was very surprised how cheap it was when he originally booked the travel.
Oh my God, this is natural selection.
There was a woman there that helped him find accommodations for the night and then get him back home. And he said he was kind of disappointed because he didn't get to see the the kangaroos and stuff, but he did get to meet the wonderful woman at the airline counter that helped him out. So he said that was good enough, and he's planning on booking another trip soon.
How did this come to the public's attention? Like, if you're this guy, don't you just sheepishly? And he probably told all of his buddies at work, "I'm going to be gone for like 10 days, guys. When I come back, I'm just going to have some Australian babe on my arm. I'll be tan." Full of Foster's beer.
Sydney, Montana is a relatively tiny town with only a couple of thousand residents. So when someone shows up and is kind of lost, it makes the news.
Dressed in
that's
like
the reason.
Hawaiian gear.
Exactly. That's the reason. He was kind of a local celebrity for 24 hours.
Poor guy. I mean, do you just stay in your house for the rest of the trip and come back and be like, yeah, it was okay?
He was happy. He was like, I met some good people. This is kind of weird, but okay. And he's planning on making another trip to Sydney. He missed out on the cruise, however, the right one this time because he knows.
And he bought tickets to a cruise too.
Yeah, and he missed it.
I mean, do you call them and say, hey, I need to get a refund?
Yeah, because I went to Montana.
Yeah, flight screwed up. Plane took me to the wrong city.
Exactly.
Not my fault.
I don't think they're going to let you do that. And our final choice this morning, sir, here you got to make the choice. We're running out of time. Giving him the old number 2, or is honesty the best
number
policy?
2, old number 2.
Giving him the old number 2. We're going to the country of the Netherlands right now and talk about the Netherlands Dance Theater in The Hague because they deeply regret actions their choreographer, Marco Grucki, recently took. See, a critic went after his recent performance in the foyer of the Hanover Opera House. Gucke was the chief choreographer and ballet director of the Hanover State Ballet, which resides at the Opera House. And during a recent piece, a critic wrote that it was awful. He said that the recent ballet was horrible and didn't like it. So what did Marco Grucki decide to do? He decided to show that critic that he meant business. The next time the critic showed up at the Hanover Ballet House in order to critique a ballet, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his bag of dog excrement, and smeared it on the man's face.
Oh, he's down the hall from us.
Yes, exactly. But he did. He took the bag of poop out, smeared it on the guy's face. And he has since apologized, and he's worried that he has basically, I'd say, smeared his career. So,
you say smeared his rear?
Yeah, his career. Yeah. So, and that's the end of it. That's the end of your Choose the News. We are today proudly sponsored by Mr. Wizard's Home Science Experiment. It is a George Brockler tribute. It's called Can It Fit? What can you put inside of your body orifices? There's a home diagram of all the things that will and will not fit just for your safety.
You got it in, my man. Hey, coming up next, Josh Sharf. By the way, tomorrow is Steven's 54th birthday. Speaking of old men, out here. George Brockler back with you here on the Friday edition of the George Show on 710 KNUS. Magic, as always, from Billy. We just got it in under the wire despite the distracting banter from your host throughout the presentation of You Choose the News. We're back for hour 2 of 4. Charlie Kirk at 10, followed by Prager, Gorka, and then Deb, live and local, 3 to 4. Deb will be down there in El Paso with us, as will Stefan, who I want to remind you all turns 54 tomorrow. I think I want you to text into the show if you can later today. If you do it now, I get the text, but you should do it later on in the show. Text in happy 60th. If you could just do that, you look great for 60, blah, blah, blah. Anything like that to make him feel a lot worse about life. If you could, I think that's what he needs at this point, especially before the El Paso trip. Now, we've told him we're a national show. That's the only reason he agreed to come on. It's our friend Josh Sharf with the Independence Institute. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I should have researched that a little more heavily, I guess.
You're being heard from coast to coast. Frankly, with the app, Josh, you can get us even in North Korea. So, I mean, there you go.
I understand that CanUS has launched a relay balloon that will relay the signal to all points in North America.
We had done that, and we'd done it in conjunction with a high school hobby, balloon hobby group. But as it turns out, the Air Force took a disliking to it and may have ended it. So we're looking for that next thing. Have you been following at all this Chinese balloon thing, Josh?
Well, yeah, along with everyone else, of course. I mean, that's so a couple of thoughts, just a couple of quick thoughts. Number one, this is not exactly the kind of threat that we were looking for, and also, it takes different sort of sensors other than just sort of your normal radar tuned to where we have it normally tuned to find these things, because they move so slowly, and so and because they have a fairly low signature, right? The balloon itself doesn't have much of a signature. The only thing that might is like the instrumentation package, or God forbid, the weapons package that's on those things,
or the next
and
one.
So, right on the net, right, of course. And then, and so, it's not. It was a hole. I mean, it was a legitimate hole. Now, what was not legitimate, of course, was picking the thing up over the Aleutians and then deciding to shoot it down after it had already completed its transcontinental
do we know
mission.
for sure they picked it up over there over the Aleutians?
Well, the Washington Post had a story claiming that they picked it up as soon as it was launched out of Hainan Island.
Now, wait a minute.
So,
this is contrary to the initial stuff that we had been fed and told that, hey, the Biden administration.
That never happened.
I know that they had just seen it as soon as the civilians were about to report it in Montana. They had seen it and then decided to let it go. Do you buy the idea that safety, I do now based on something I'll say, but that safety was the reason they let it transverse the rest of the United States? Originally, I thought it was because they were like, man, the debris could fall anywhere. And I think a lot of people were like, Montana has 15 people in a giant state. How can you worry about that? I now think that the reason is because what if we miss? Because they did. One of these balloons, the missile we fired, the $8 trillion missile, missed. And I think maybe they were thinking it's one of those like you do in firearms, like know what's beyond your target.
Yeah, so I think once it reaches a more densely populated area, that's reasonable. Montana, again, the range of a Sidewinder is only about 22 miles, and and if it misses, it detonates. So it's possible to. This was not something where you're going to be raining down a live missile on some farmer, in his field. Now, listen, there's always the possibility, but later it turns out that we knew that we picked it up when it was over Alaska, which is even less densely populated than Montana. Yeah, and you got the whole Yukon and certainly southern Alberta might be a problem, but northern Alberta and British Columbia, not so much. So, and I've driven through that. But by the way, I've actually driven through those areas. It's a lot like what you think of in terms of Montana. There's nobody there. So the idea that we were going to hit somebody on the ground. Now, there were a friend of mine raised two interesting points, one of which we'll never know. Was there a fear of even a small amount of bioweapon? So you want that in the atmosphere. And number two, because, the Chinese are good at that. And number two was, and that's not a COVID remark per se. That's just, the Chinese have a long-standing bioweapons program. That's a known fact, so that that's not a COVID conspiracy statement.
No,
That's
I
just
get it.
a general statement of Chinese interests and capabilities. And then the other possibility is, if that thing lands on private land and it's hard to get to, or somebody decides to do a souvenir hunting. So there was potentially a little concern about that. Again, I think that's less of an issue if you're talking about shooting the thing down over northern British Columbia. But once it reaches the Mississippi, once it reaches even the Missouri, and then you've got more people, and
Why
there's
why not drop this thing over the Aleutians? I mean, what's the concern? Do you have a
I
hypothesis on that?
No, I don't know. I got nothing. I mean, I think maybe just general. Maybe they were interested in it and they weren't sure. And they wanted maybe there was a feeling that they wanted to know more about it. Maybe there was it seems also as though, at least the reports are, again, you never quite know, that Biden asked them to come up with, solutions to shoot it down, and the Pentagon was reluctant to do that. Is there a passivity on the part of it? Is there I don't know. I mean, I've seen it wouldn't be the first time our senior command has, sandbagged the president on stuff like that.
How about the response afterwards, where Biden kind of poo-poos it like, well, they spy on us, we spy on them. It's balloons anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just that's not exactly Eisenhowerian, is it? I mean, you can imagine President Eisenhower standing up there, and he would give a very serious comment about how this is a serious issue, that it didn't necessarily constitute a declaration of war, but I think you want a president who at least appears to take this kind of stuff seriously.
Yeah, he said this isn't a major breach. And I'm like, well, then what would be a major breach? A bigger balloon? Several balloons? What are we looking for?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people talk about, they say, well, this was at 60,000 feet, and whatever package it had wouldn't necessarily be better than what they could get with satellites, except it could be, because satellites don't have the loiter time that a balloon has.
That's exactly what I said. The maneuverability too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's some maneuverability. I mean, it's still mostly at the mercy of the jet stream, but there's at 60,000 feet, there are some limitations on that. But yeah, I mean, you can sort of sit there, hang around for a while, assess traffic, radio, if you're doing signals intelligence, you kind of sit there for a while and do some of that. Satellites are overhead for a much shorter period of time, and much more, and usually much more predictably. The fuel required to change satellite, or the spy satellites tend to move in usually in relatively predictable ways. We can move them a little bit, and in cases like crises, like the first Gulf War, for instance, we're sort of moving satellites around to see things. You can do that, but again, the loiter time is not so good. And then you got to try and move them back. I mean, if you're trying to get someplace faster, you can sort of do that. But changing the plane of the orbit is very expensive. Balloons can do a lot more.
I think too that some people texting him, by the way, Josh, like, you really believe they were concerned about people in this country. I've had a lot of people say that Biden let it continue its path so that China could continue to gather information. That's just crazy. That there's
that seems a little silly.
That does seem silly.
Honestly, that seems a little silly. Yes, I think they're concerned about people in the country. Yes, I don't think they certainly, if nothing else, they certainly didn't want the headline of, some school bus full of kids out on a, on a field trip, getting hit by the wreckage of a missile.
It's still inexplicable to me they didn't drop this thing as it started to enter our airspace on the other side of the country. This awareness gap, which is such an interesting phrase, this awareness gap that NORAD admitted to, my guess is now whatever that sensitivity setting they have on their massive radars and detection system is set to a place now where large birds will be picked up. I imagine things just got super complicated for them.
Well, it certainly, they're going to have to work on on what's what. I mean, if you're shooting down, high school science projects, I guess that's probably not the best.
They had it coming. But by the way, if you're in high school, Josh, and you put up a project that the military has to bring down with a missile, isn't that like the crowning achievement of your young life? Isn't that the thing where I built this project? You have a T-shirt. I built a project. The Department of Defense blew it up. I mean, people are like, dude, that's so cool.
Yeah, you could probably, I guess, I guess if you're a kid, you've been working on this thing for all year, and then suddenly it's, you're not going to get out of it what you want. That might be disappointing. On the other hand, yeah, I could certainly see them coming up with some fun T-shirts on that. Sure.
Billy, speaking of that, can we try to book one of those kids? I think they're unbelievable. Can we shift gears a little bit over to a place called Ukraine? We're hitting a moment in the calendar where there is a break in the harsh winter that's out there, but before the mud really thaws. And the mudding season apparently is a tough one if you're going to end up trying to launch any sort of a ground offensive. So the concern here is that Putin is massing troops, hundreds of thousands of them, and has already begun to engage in a massive offensive. I've heard other people that are on the radio, certainly smarter, younger, and better looking than me, guys like Charlie Kirk, who have said this is such a critical moment. This is going to be a bloodbath. Before we get to his suggestion on how to avert it, what is your sense of where we're at?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's both sides are actually sort of ready, are actually readying offensives, and so what Russia is doing right now is that this is how Russia does this. Right? They conduct these small engagements all along the front, and what that does is that kind of keeps you pinned down because you can't really. It's not. They're bloody, but they don't really gain very much. But what they do is they kind of keep you pinned down, and then ideally, from their point of view, they're massing troops for some place to break through. Now, it's an interesting question whether or not they actually have what it takes to be able to break through. We've considered they may not have the armor to be able to do. They may not have the manpower to be able to do that. And one
Who's
of the
they?
things,
Russia or Ukraine?
The Russians. And one of the things that we to consider is, the tanks that we sent are not just offensive weapons. They certainly can be counter. They certainly can be used to plug gaps in the line if armor is coming through. They're the effective counter armor. Right. So if the Russians do manage to put through something where they, put through a bunch of tanks, well, then the best response to that is, tanks is the tank formation coming at them.
There's something else that I read, and maybe this is part of what you're about to say too, is that I read some Pentagon person's analysis that something like 97% of the Russian military, or at least the army, is committed already to Ukraine. That seems to me to put them in a pretty weak spot elsewhere.
Well, I don't know that there's much of an elsewhere for them. They're not really worried about being invaded by China, but I think what it does is it means that they're all in at this point. So do they? They're sort of rolling the dice on this, and Ukraine is also looking to launch an offensive as well. The question is who has the initiative right now. It kind of looks like Russia might have the initiative, but if an attack doesn't develop, or if an attack develops and it gets bogged down and doesn't do, if we sort of see a replay of the early part of last year, where Russia thinks it can move quickly and then gets caught by the weather, by the melting, by the.
Are you
the
convinced
mud.
though that they are launching offensive, or is this just bluster?
Oh no, I mean they want to win.
Okay.
They want to win. This is not a. Yeah, they want to end Ukraine as a functional country.
This brings me to my next point. Is Charlie Kirk was saying, "Hey, we are now flirting with the potential for a World War III, and because of this, and aren't we obligated as Americans to inject ourselves into this thing and force some sort of peace talks?" And I think Charlie had also said at one point that would result in the Russians getting Eastern Ukraine, or whatever the portions of Eastern Ukraine they seek right now. Any thoughts on that?
I think that this has been talked about, but it hasn't been seriously talked about from the Russian side. Yeah, I mean, you can't offer a peace plan, if you will, that one side just isn't interested in. I don't think Putin's interested in that. I mean, it's a nice thought. Gee, why can't we? It's a very nice sort of American thought. Why can't we just split the difference and you
with
know,
someone else's
and give away,
country?
and
You know?
right, and give away half of somebody else's country. You know, we've done that before. You know, and you know, and then everybody will be happy except for the people who, you know, suddenly are under Putin's rule. But you know, they're just, you know, eggs, omelets. You know, it's a sort of a very American idea that we can just sort of split the difference and come to an agreement. I don't think Putin's interested in that.
What is
certainly,
Putin interested in? What do you think his ultimate goal here is, at least with Ukraine?
Yeah, no, I think it's the same as it has been before. He wants to end Ukraine. He wants to reabsorb Ukraine into the, you know, into Mother Russia.
Huh.
He sees this as and he's been quite clear that he sees the Ukrainians and the Russians as one Slavic people, and that and there's a geostrategic interest here too, which is that without Ukraine, Russia essentially ceases to be a European power, and Russia has always wanted to be always wants to be a European power.
How much is this a potential existential threat to Russia? And maybe I should say Putin.
Well, those are two different things.
Yes, they are.
I think Russia could probably afford to go back to the status quo ante, not losing Crimea, not losing the areas that it took in 2014. Although I will note that for whatever weight the plebiscite, for the separation plebiscite carries, even Crimea voted slightly, like 53-47, in favor of leaving Russia. Even Crimea did that. So it's not like, you know, Crimea is full of people who just want to be part of Russia. So you could see Russia surviving that. I don't think you could see Putin surviving that.
So you don't see any end in sight for this? I mean, if he sees it as an existential threat, how this thing turns out, and the Ukrainians certainly see it as an existential threat, when does this end and how does it end? I mean, is this one side's got to win everything, the other side's got to lose everything, or is there something else that we could hope for?
I can't crawl that far inside Putin's. And, you know, also a lot of the criticism inside Russia is not a lot of criticism of the war is about how poorly it's been conducted, not necessarily about the ultimate aims.
Buddy, that's interesting stuff. Listen, I want to talk to you too about the legislature. You have been following that pretty closely too, but we're up on a break for this segment. Can you stick around for another segment?
Absolutely.
That's so foolish, but thank you for that. Thank you for doing that, Josh. We're going to give you a chance to end your career here in just a moment, if you'll stick around. That's Josh Sharf with the Independence Institute. Always a fascinating discussion with a guy who just seems to know more than I'm getting from almost any other source. It makes me concerned. Like, is this guy somehow plugged in a way he shouldn't be? Like, he's hacked into very, very much like War Games. Has he hacked into the Pentagon's Whopper? Listen, before we cut away, though, I want to tell you about Mitch Floria from the Art of Granite. Right now, you are trapped inside your house a lot because of the weather, although it's looking a little bit better here for the following week as we hover around the 45 to 50 degree range. When you're inside and you're cleaning up your kitchen, which you do every day, I am cleaning the kitchen every single day. It turns out the kids have not figured out that things can move from the countertop into the dishwasher. Like there's some magic elf that does that. It turns out it's this gray-haired elf talking to you right now. You're looking at your countertops thinking, I loved these back when they first got put in here, but I want an upgrade. The only number you need to call is the one for Mitch Floria. And frankly, start with the website, The Art of Granite, and it's got a T in it. Granite does, theartofgranite.com. But just remember that name doesn't tell you the whole story, because he does more than granite. He does granite. He does marble. He does all the man-made stuff from quartz to anything else you can think of. And he's got it all at his showroom right there, easy to get to, right about 6th Avenue, Colfaxy area. Waze or Google Maps can get you there, or Apple, if you're willing to roll the dice and end up in the wrong Sydney. But you go out there and two things happen. One, even before you get inside the showroom, you can see these wonderful giant slabs of granite and marble and all these other things he has waiting to be put into your kitchen or your master bathroom. And the other thing that happens is you meet a guy who you fall in love with, because this dude is straight up American. Didn't start that way. Started under communist controlled Romania. and then immigrated to the United States legally, started a family, started a business. And this dude just got it, man. I mean, he makes you proud to be an American too. It's everywhere, on him, in his office. This guy's all about customer service too. Everybody that has used him, that we've referred him to here at 710, has reached back out and said something nice. Those that have reached out have all said, hey, this was great. Thank you for doing that. And here's the kicker. You mentioned KNUS. You mentioned this show on 710. You get 20% off of labor. That's 1 out of every $5 you would have spent on labor now back in your pocket. That's huge. Or you might opt for the free bathroom sink or the kitchen sink with your countertop package. This guy is all about pleasing you and upgrading the interior of your home. Why don't you give him a shout? You don't have to go through a bunch of people to get to him either. Owner of the store is the guy who gives out his number. I love that. 303-386-5919. 303-386-5919. That's theartofgranite.com. When we come back, we'll be joined again by Josh Sharf. Stick around. It's George Brockler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Little Run DMC right here on the George Brockler Show, 710 KNUS, going right back to the VIP line. He may have nodded off. It's Josh Sharf from the Independence Institute. Are you with us?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sticking around, Josh. There are some things you're monitoring going on in our well-balanced legislature under the Gold Dome there. They only have 120 days to remake Colorado in the image of California. How are they doing?
Well, they certainly have their nose to the grindstone. So a couple of bills that we're looking at. Number one, I don't know. There's the big gun control bill, the assault weapons bill, which sort of seems to have been.
Has it dropped yet?
No, it hasn't. And
Weird.
I suspect the reason is that they're having a hard time lining up. It may even be that the governor has kind of said, guys, because that's never been as. He's probably willing to go along with a lot of stuff, but it's never been like a key issue of his. And
he's also looking nationally.
Of course. And so that informs a lot of this sudden apparent, I think more apparent than real shift to, to trying to look reasonable and trying to look more toward the middle. But I think that the big bill has not, but what has dropped and I think has made it out of committee is I may even made it out of the House, is the bill that would allow counties to prevent firearms discharges on private property.
Hey, what is that about?
Well, I mean, it's, so the rationale is, you don't want people shooting off guns and the bullet goes off, downstream and so forth. That's the rationale. But that's the alleged rationale. But the real reason is, like anything else, like with the, let's limit concealed carry in this patchwork of areas so that you're never quite sure if you're carrying legally, if the spot where you are is legal or not. So you don't end up not carrying. Let's just make it harder for people to practice. Let's just make it harder on people to go out if they have a private firearms range, for instance, if they have a large piece of land.
Now, would that impact commercial? It says private, but would it impact commercial ranges? I suppose it could. I suppose that if a county said no no discharges on private property, I suppose they could, get rid of ranges altogether if they wanted to. But and here's the thing. This is being cast somewhat as as one of these sort of rural urban things, and I think that's not unreasonable to think of it that way. But we have to understand that just as the state has city and rural areas, or city and suburban and rural areas, many counties also have that. And sort of the prototype for this might be Boulder County, where you have, the city of Boulder and increasingly Longmont, but the city of Boulder, which is obviously hard left and densely populated, but there are plenty of rural areas there, and this is a situation where a rural area would get big-footed by the liberals in Boulder City, because they're going to tend to control the county council as well. So you have, and it doesn't require, or rather, it doesn't require state action. You can just sort of make it very inconvenient for people, and then that just discourages ownership. But worse, it can discourage people from staying in practice, and that's even worse, right? Because then you have somebody who isn't it. So there's that becomes part of this as well. Maybe they're just trying to outlaw desk pops. I don't know if you saw that in the movie The Wrong Guys, but anyway, if you haven't, you need to go check it out. I had a friend of mine from Adams County, a rural part of Adams County, call me yesterday, and we had a discussion, and she was saying, listen, who's going to come out to take care of the skunks and the raccoons? Because we shoot skunks and raccoons on our property because they impact the other animals and all this other stuff. Who's doing that? Animal control? And, got a little 22. They got enough land that it's not an issue. She's like, they're going to tell me I can't do that anymore? Because this is crazy. The next most ASPCA apparently compliant way to take down these animals, these predators and of course, skunk smell, is to drown them. Like you catch them in the cages and then you drown them. And I'm
Oh,
like, that doesn't seem like that's a better outcome. And I don't know why you'd want to do that. Can't you come up with like a little noose or something and like hang them on the property for others to see? It feels like we're going down a very dark road.
well, it just, shooting them sounds, to people who don't know, shooting them sounds, kind of cruel, but drowning them
Oh
is
my God.
I mean, that's horrifying.
Yeah. If
I mean, the animal
waterboarding is bad for people,
it's terrifying. I mean, the animal's going to get, I mean, that's horribly cruel. And I don't understand why you would. Yeah. So that's a good point. Eastern Adams and Eastern Arapahoe County as well. What could potentially end up being dominated, again, the county. You could see the county council enacting something, and then the people out east having to live with that.
Now, listen, the legislature isn't just smart about gun control; they know the appropriate rent to set as well. What's going on with that?
Well, or they think that city councils might. Since 1980, so for about almost 45 years, so 43 years, there has been a ban in state law on rent control, on municipalities enacting rent control. And so there has recently, with progressives taking over city councils in places like Denver, there's become increasing interest in reimposing rent control in order to make housing more affordable. Now we'll get to that in a second. Anyway, what this bill would do was it would just basically be a clean repeal of that section of the state of the Colorado Revised Statutes, and would allow municipalities to impose rent control. So what this really is trying to do is repeal the laws of economics. And there have been a number of studies. You go to the National Bureau of Economic Research, you go to the NBER site, and you can pull up a few studies on this. Number one, it does what you absolutely would expect, and what the experience was in New York and other places that tried this, is that it decreases housing stock. It discourages investment, because your rate of return obviously is going to be below what it would have been before. It puts your ability to set your rent obviously at the mercy of some bureaucrat, because the city council is never going to say, well, here's what you can do. They'll set up some commission and employ a bunch of people to figure out what the right number is, and then so it will discourage people from building more, but it will also discourage them from maintaining the property properly that they have. Notably, this is happening at the same time that Denver is considering permitting what are called sort of granny flats, allowing people to turn sheds or garages, substantive structures.
Industrial
when I say
boxes,
shed, I don't mean into housing. And some of that would obviously be for rent, but then they're going to turn around and potentially impose rent control on that. The other thing that's interesting about this, and this was done, there was a study, this was done in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Or maybe it was just St. Paul, it was in the Twin Cities. They said, so the argument is that there's this massive transfer, because rents have gone up, this massive transfer of wealth from poor people to wealthier people. What's interesting is that when you do rent control, the people who get the most, who get the most benefit out of it are well-to-do renters, and the people who suffer the most are the people are sort of lower income along that scale of people who have property that they can rent out, lower income property owners. So it ends up actually being a transfer of wealth upward.
Oh, that's terrific.
It
And
ends
by
up being
the way,
another
also,
transfer of wealth upward.
I know that you'll know this, but can you please list all the places where rent control has worked?
Yeah, right. No, exactly. I mean, the only circumstance where it was potentially justified for a brief period of time, and this was when it initially was created, was all the people coming home from the war, and they couldn't find any place to live in New York, and it was just driving to. So there was a sense that these were guys being taken advantage of, and so you wanted not to have not to have that situation, but that should have been a very temporary, and of course, like any thing, it becomes permanent very quickly. So that was the initial justification. Wasn't entirely crazy, but we've got years, we've got decades, many decades of experience with this now, and we should know better.
Yeah, except if you watched it all, and I hope you spent time with your family instead, watched it all, that 9 News debate last night with the mayoral candidates, there's a number of them, including some front runners who are very interested in the idea of rent control or rent stabilization, words to that effect. It's coming for Denver if certain people get elected. Let's shift gears to something else. I'm a para employee, or at least I used to be when I was the DA for that brief period of time. What's the reform they're trying to do to save this thing? Because I need it to be around in case I ever earn 20 years of para credit.
Yeah, so this isn't so much a reform. The main reform has already been done. What this is a bill. One of the aspects of that reform was that if we found ourselves below where we needed to be in order to be at 100% funding in, I think the year is 2047. I think that's the target year. If we found ourselves below that number, then para was allowed to lower cost of living adjustment. It could lower cost of living adjustments and could require increased contributions from active members and from employees. Well, what's happened, and those cost of living adjustments apply to people who are already retired. So what happened over the last couple of years, and now ongoing with sort of the return of inflation, which of course nobody could see coming, that the
it snuck up on us.
Is my sarcasm voice there? Yeah. So what's happened is that people who are already retired are finding that rents and everything else, and eggs, everything else is going up very quickly, where their cost of living adjustments are not keeping pace. And so the intent was to try to find some way to help them without undermining the long-term para reform, without doing something that would undermine the long-term plan for para. So this is outside of that. What it does, and that was the justification. What it does is it basically is a $700 refundable tax credit to anyone who is retired. Yes, for the next 2 years, for anyone who is retired on any public pension, not just para, any public pension, municipal, fire, whatever, in the state, or an independent school if there's a school system that's not part of para. Any or $700 refundable tax credit to anyone who is retired. I think the age cutoff is 55 years or older, and I think that's right. But it's and
for para?
And so a refundable tax. Yeah, well, for anyone who's retired on any public, including para.
I got it. Well, para, I know is 55. I've been eyeballing that thing, thinking the math will never work for me.
Well, it certainly doesn't work for the state. I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars that's going to go out the door. And, I would like, what about the people who have to, I understand that inflation is difficult, but, it's also difficult for the people who are paying the taxes.
Oh my gosh.
Who have to pay for this thing, and by the way, this comes right out of your TABOR refund, right? I mean, this is just extra spending that just comes right out of your TABOR refund.
That doesn't have to be voted on by us peeps?
Well, because it's, because of the way the cap works. The way the cap was done, this just comes right out of that. And so there's no
I got it.
It's just money that won't be available for the refund. I'm working here. I'm trying to put money away for my kids' college and my kids, day school and retirement and everything else. And I would love to have a $700 refundable tax credit because things got more expensive,
Josh, you always leave us on such a bright, glowing note. I can't thank you enough for letting us go into the weekend with this hanging over our head.
Just a little ray of sunshine.
Yeah,
that's
maybe the F-22s can bring that dark cloud down the way they did that hobby group's balloon. Josh Sharf from the Independence Institute. My man, thanks for coming on. We'll have you on again. I just love talking to you. The time goes by so quickly.
Thanks much, George. Have a great weekend.
You too. See you, buddy. Hey, that was Josh Sharf with the Independence Institute. We're going to cut away for a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by somebody wicked smart from our buddies at Alpine. You stick around. It's George Brockler on the George Show, 710 KNUS. George Brockler back with you here on 710 KNUS. I've missed this man deeply. He's our North Carolina buddy from right here in Colorado. It's Brian Gray from Alpine Planning. Sir, where have you been?
Doing a lot of traveling, George, going back east, but one more trip, and then I think we're done for a couple months here.
I hope it's for all good reasons. That's my hope.
It is. It's for all good reasons, but Amy told me if I didn't come on today, she said, George is going to crop you out of the picture.
Not so much. I think I would just weep on the phone. Like it would be Amy, and I'd be like, I need a moment. It's good to hear your voice.
Let's take a look at it this way. We were talking about it yesterday, the three of us, and we tried to compare it to the Super Bowl. I know Amy was talking about that on Monday. So you figure Amy's the pregame show, Gabe's the halftime entertainment, and then you got me doing the postgame trying to wrap up the week. So that's how we're going to look at it.
I'll take it.
And right now, if we take a look at all three of these indexes, the Dow's in the red. It's down 102. NASDAQ's down 103. Then the S&P's down 26. But if you take a look at the bigger picture for the week, the Dow's still up 1%. Year to date, the S&P's up almost 8%. We're taking a look at the S&P and the NASDAQ. They're actually on course for their fourth positive month out of 5 months. So that's some good news there. It's kind of interesting. People are just now getting their fourth quarter statements, and they're opening them up, and they're saying, "Wow, I was up 3, 4, 5, 6%, just in that one quarter." And it goes back to the old adage, don't look at this stuff every week or every day. Just make sure you got a good game plan going in. Make sure you got a good diversified portfolio, and take a look at it on the quarter. Make adjustments from there, but don't micromanage it. If you do that, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And it's proven that the less you look at it, the better rate of return that you're going to receive. Which I've never quite understood that, but I guess that's just the cycle of emotions.
Brian, when you're looking at the future, and it seems like so much of this is based on either the private sector making earnings reportings or the Fed coming out with certain numbers, what's the next thing you're looking at that will give us some sense of which direction we're going, whether it's we're headed towards the big R, we're not headed towards the big R, inflation's under control? What are you looking for?
I wrote down 5 of them here. I wrote down the deficit, the issues with that. They came out, I think it was either yesterday or the day before. Yeah, and they said, we're going to add another $19 trillion in 10 years. Take a look at inflation. We still need to get that under control. And then you got the concerns now between Social Security and Medicare. Those two programs are running out. And then a little bit longer term down the road, you got Trump's tax cuts that are going to be expiring. So I think the next 6 to 9 months are going to be a little choppy. But if we can just get some of this under control, we can make a little bit of money this year, and that's the name of the game.
No, I appreciate that. I think that we are long past the idea that I don't feel comfortable anymore making decisions about my own retirement just because there are so many variables that I can't keep track of in my head. I'm glad you guys are out there for the purpose of giving people advice and giving them some ease of mind.
Yeah, it's you don't want to do it alone. You want to have a team behind you. You want somebody looking over your shoulder. I think that's the big thing. And let me just circle it all back. And it all goes back to emotions. When you do something, based on an emotion, typically it's going to be the wrong thing to do. So you just need somebody to kind of talk you off the ledge every now and then. Heck, that's how we do it in our office. I might be panicking, and Amy and Gabe might say, "Oh, sit down, take a deep breath," vice versa. So you got to have that type of teamwork working for you.
You guys seem largely unflappable to me, especially Amy. Like, I presume that there are several times a day she has to tell Gabe to put on his big boy pants and just keep moving forward. It's just the image in my head. I don't know if that's true.
You said it. Now, how's that?
Alpine Planning Group is a comprehensive financial planning firm committed to improving your long-term, that's the key, long-term financial success. Investing As always, it's a matter of trust. They're prepared to earn yours. You can just hear it in their voices. Call them today, 303-843-0918, 303-843-0918. Brian, you have a great weekend. Can't wait to hear you again.
Hey, you too, George. Talk to you next week.
See you, buddy.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Woodbury Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC and registered investment advisor. Alpine Planning Group and Woodbury Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated entities. 14 West Dry Creek Circle, Littleton, Colorado, 80120.
In my mind, I had asked Alexa, is the stock market open Monday next week? And she responded without actually hearing it in text. No, it's not, because it is President's Day. Also, we got a text in from a legislator who told us, this is our buddy, Representative Lisa Frizzell, who has told us that the para-tax credit that Josh Sharf talked about, it's only going to cost us $240 million over 2 years. That sounds like $250 million, or at least it used to be. I don't know. Listen, when we come back, Patty Calhoun can't wait to have the conversation with the number one person over there at Westword. Just saw her yesterday. It's George Brockler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Halfway through the last show of the week, at least the last one for me. There's going to be Deb Flora at 3 and Stephen Tubbs from 4 to 7. And then we'll all be in a place called El Paso, Texas next week. So this is my last full week in Denver for God knows how long. I just imagine a couple weeks, but with some other upcoming travel, and I'll let you know about that. But I'm going to be on air, I think, every single day. So my apologies in advance. I'm not apologizing for this, though. We've got a great VIP guest on who has been a regular on the show, and I appreciate that. I listened to Patty when she was on with Pete a ton. They just know stuff I don't, so I really just try to let Patty talk. Patty Calhoun from Westword, thank you for taking time out of your morning to join us.
Good morning, George.
Now, you and I got to spend some time together yesterday at the palatial studios of PBS 12 for purposes of the Colorado Inside Out that will air today. Without using the word stroke-like, how would you describe my struggles with the word proliferation?
Very similar to many of the stumbles I've done on that show. It's like, well, radio. When you make a mistake, you just have to keep going. But once you've realized you've made the mistake, it's kind of hard to dig yourself out.
And in fact, it gets compounded by the fact that our wonderful host, Kyle Dyer, very, very nice lady, tells us exactly what we're supposed to talk about in terms of, hey, let's talk about a bad thing and then we'll talk about a good thing. And I just hijacked the entire process and vomited both up in the same period. And I thought, I don't remember drinking before the shooting, but I could have. I mean, it was just crazy.
You were just so happy you had to share all the good things early.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about the bad thing I talk about, which is
huge. Huge
thing.
Yeah.
CNN had it on this morning. I know it's in the Washington Post. We talk about it a little bit on the show. I did want to, if I may correct you, it's Cleo Parker Robinson Dance Theater.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
but
Screw that. Thank you.
It's like a bad thing happens to good people. They celebrated their 50th anniversary last year during the pandemic. Such an important institution.
Yeah, it is.
Had taken over an old African-American church, and it is not wheelchair accessible to the stage, but that no one figured Chris Hines, an incumbent councilman, shouldn't need to remind them he is in a wheelchair.
No, he should not. And what makes it so awful is if you watch that video on the Washington Post thing, and I had mentioned yesterday on the show, and I'm very sensitive to this because of my own son. In fact, just ironically, the wheelchair that Chris drives or rides in is one that my son tried out yesterday. Looks identical to the one that my son tried out yesterday. And, you know, you're always about thinking in terms of dignity and respect and trying to treat people the same regardless of whatever's going on with them. And that was the absence of that completely. And you could see the people around him. They had no idea what to do. Like, there's no chance they're lifting up that 400-pound wheelchair onto the stage and having him try to, you know, shush his way. I mean, I've watched my son struggle with some things, and I just thought, damn, nobody could have figured this out ahead of time. Like, can't there be now a contribution that would create the Chris Hines accessibility ramp or something for the future? Because this is crazy.
Well, I will say this, Cleo Parker Robinson got a lot of money to renovate that church, which is great, but it just isn't happening fast enough. So I think this will bring awareness around the country to the issue. It also brings up a problem with the Fair Elections Fund, which is, why did they schedule a debate in the middle of a Denver City Council meeting?
Great question.
That's what we hired Chris Hines. I mean, we voted for him to do 4 years ago. Voters wanted him to be on city council. So the debate's scheduled so he can't be there. And if he didn't go to the debate, he wouldn't be in line for the Fair Elections Fund money, and that was $125,000.
Unbelievable. I didn't see Chris on the stage yesterday when I watched, and I think you did too, the 9 News debate with most, but not all of the mayoral candidates.
Well, you didn't see him yesterday because he's not running for mayor. He's running for a seat again on city council.
So he was just out there for a normal.
Last night,
thank you for that. Thank you.
He's a great candidate, but for
I get it.
9, and there's several other people running. No, but you can bet they were very, very careful last night when they figured out where people were going to be sitting and how to get them there. I cannot imagine any debate in Denver will not be proactive from now on.
It looked last night on the stage a lot like I don't know how to describe it, but one of those Fox News kind of community groups where you're like, what did you think when the president said blank? You know what I mean? And getting feedback.
Oh, yeah, with Frank Luntz.
Yeah, it's like a Frank Luntz. Yeah, exactly. That's a great reference. They were all kind of sitting behind each other, but staggered and all that stuff. What was your overall impression of how it went? And then we'll talk about some of the details.
I thought the Channel 9 folks had pretty good control of, you've got, what were there, 13 candidates, 13. I think, showed up last night?
13.
So it's really hard to figure out how to do that in an orderly fashion, ask them questions, let them all take a bite of the apple, and allow rebuttals. So I think Channel 9 did a really good job of organizing it, even though it looked like they were sitting at some kind of cafe with Frank Luntz.
That's right.
I thought the pile-on Chris Hansen was really interesting. At the previous debate, it was kind of a pile-on on Debbie Ortega. Now it was Chris Hansen and his ads.
Yeah, tell folks who may not have seen that ad what the controversy was about, because I didn't know that was an issue. And when they brought it up, man, it was a feeding frenzy. Everybody seemed to want to take a piece.
Yeah, frankly, I hadn't realized it either. And then to add insult to injury, right after that show, which I was watching on Nine's affiliate, up comes the Chris Hansen ad.
Oh, no.
The concern was that in those ads, there's a disproportionate number of people of color showed when they're talking about homelessness and when they're talking about crime. I didn't actually get a chance to count as I was looking at that ad yesterday, but several of the candidates really took off after him. Kwame, I believe, Leslie Herod. Several people took off after him on that ad, and that was a tough one. If you are really, you went to MIT, you should know all this stuff.
Well,
get the statistics better. It was tough.
Well, somebody failed him, right? Like, this isn't Chris Hansen saying, this is my ad, I'm going to make this ad. Now, he's responsible for it, but clearly somebody who's doing comms for him or something did not watch that and say, hey, this looks bad. This looks off. And so someone failed this guy. And his response, though, and I was taken with this too, was like, listen, I wasn't just cherry picking anything. It's just video that we took on the streets of Denver. Like, this is not my point in pointing this out. It's that this is overall, but it didn't seem to push back hard enough, because you're right. Kwame went after him as well, for obvious reasons. It was very, very interesting. I don't know if that moment will have staying power. What do you think?
I think it will. It'll be, they have made a case and he's going to have to disprove it. I thought it was interesting. You mentioned Kwame. I thought Kwame did well last night, and that who had agreed with Chris on some points, definitely took off after him on that is not going to help Chris. But I mean, Kwame was saying some tough things, as you noted.
Listen, I love the fact that this guy was prepared for Kyle's question. Now, Kyle is an expert interviewer, and when he crafts a question, every word matters. And so he came after Kwame's statement that he had said, listen, there's more than half of the homeless, or the people experiencing homelessness on the streets there, are doing it as a matter of choice. And then Kyle came at him with the question that was like, which person experiencing homeless or group that works in that area are you relying upon for that statement? And dude was ready. Dude came forward with, and I can't remember the name of the group, Patty, but he came forward with the number. He said, and their own study showed that something like 53% of the folks would prefer to live on the street in a tent than they would in any sort of housing. And I thought, man, that guy was ready to go.
Yeah, so I think that was Denver Homeless Out Loud. They were talking
That's right.
About study, and people had done a fair amount of study on all this. So it was interesting to see who was prepared, who wasn't. You still, if you didn't know, well, we haven't seen much on polling. We've seen how much money people have raised, but it's still hard to tell when you just watch that debate who's really gaining, who's really the front runner. It's hard to tell.
I agree with you. Were there any surprise moments there? And I don't mean shocking, like, campaign crippling, but answers where you thought, oh boy, that's something.
Let's see. I did think that Kwame said some hard things that were not going to be necessarily woke crowd pleasers. Was interesting.
I agree with you. When the dude comes out and says we need to enforce the laws, and he's the only one that said it, he came out very strong. I know that Kyle had asked a series of questions about who thinks we need more police, and you could see that it wasn't every hand that went up, and some of those answers were surprising. When they talked about fentanyl, with Leslie Herod. I thought that was interesting, especially when you know how Kyle likes to sneak in the little jabs that you can't respond to, where Leslie tried to chime in on an answer and he goes, we'll get to the fact that you flip-flopped on fentanyl in a moment. And I'm like, dang, I mean, that's just a sucker punch, you know? And then when they got to asking her about it, there's this fentanyl bill. She said, well, I'm not a sponsor because I ultimately will be probably, but I'm not right now. It was a very weird answer.
Her answer on that, she didn't do well on that. Also, Debbie Ortega, talking about safe injection sites, that the city had one. I mean, the city does have an office, but it doesn't harm reduction center. But I don't believe there is a safe injection site in the city. But I'm going to have to go fact check that because a couple of people jumped on that one too.
No, that sounded very much like a radio.
Before the legislature.
Go ahead, say that again.
Oh, but the safe injection site is going before the legislature because although Denver approved having them in 2018, then the bill, I mean, the thing Denver approved requires the state to allow them, and the state hasn't yet, and that's coming up. So that issue was very murky last night.
I think
fact checking on Debbie there.
They will call Debbie Ortega the George Brockler on the radio for that moment, because that's like asking why wasn't Chris Hines at the mayoral debate. So Debbie, you've got good company here. Something else that Leslie said was that she and Brittany Pedersen, and I can't remember who the third person was, they took a trip up to Van City there in Canada, up to Vancouver, to take a look at the safe injection site. I've been up there, not for that. I don't know if you've been up there, Patty. Beautiful city until you get to Hastings Street, which is where the homeless drug thing. It is a scene out of World War Z with the zombies, just lost souls. But she said, hey, they have these safe injection sites. They're working really well. They found that when you have a place for people to safely take drugs, that they're more likely to seek help. I'd never seen a study like that or heard of that. I'll look into that. But that was an answer that got my attention too. Like, there's one thing about saying, hey, we're saving lives. I get that. I understand that. I don't understand hey, we're going to have a better shot at getting these people if they continue to use drugs. But that was just one. That's probably the prosecutor in me that heard that. Anything that you thought of as you listen to some of these other answers?
Well, on the safe injection site, the issue is maybe you're saving lives, but are you sacrificing part of a city? And I think that is going to be one of the issues that comes up with the legislature, which is how, if you have those services, how do you work around those services? What's the city like around them? I thought Kelly Brough talking about the suicide of her husband was pretty astonishing. When you talk about addiction issues, that was an eye opener.
Kelly's a front runner, and I'm just going off of fundraising and probably some name ID stuff. Kelly, Michael Johnson, I think Leslie. Out of those three, and I'm probably leaving some names off that you think are also up there as well. Did anybody have a standout performance or really trip up?
Of those three, no, I don't think so. It did seem like Leslie, for example, had been told after the last debate to look friendlier. Did you notice? I mean, she was smiling a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wonder if people have said you cannot seem as angry. It did seem like she had done that. Kelly was exactly like, and Mike both pretty much performed the way they had before, steady, that they could be chief executives.
How do any of these folks break through? I mean, how many move on? Is it just the top two move on?
Just the top two move on, and the top two with 13, really 17 people in the election. What is it going to take to be in that top two? It might just take 15, 17% of the vote. So you're going to get two people who won't even have gotten together the majority of the vote in Denver when we move on to the runoffs. I think a significant mistake can really harm a candidacy. I think, for example, that Chris Hansen ad is going to wind up hurting him. I think depending on how the safe injection site discussion goes, that could wind up hurting.
I think that could as well. I'm taken by this. When is the big election in Denver? Not the one that whittles it down to the primary, but when do we know who the next mayor of Denver is going to be?
First week in June.
Do you have anyone?
The 4th of April, and then we've got, I think it's June 6th. I could be wrong, but
no, you're never wrong. That's me. That's my job.
Oh, I'm often wrong.
Do you have any sense, like right now, if you had to bet, knowing that everything could change at the end, and there's always that possibility, If you had to put money on it, Patty, and I know you're swimming in coin, who would it be?
I'm not betting on this one. I think it's going to shift a lot before April 4th, and then it's going to shift again. So you could, it's until that first vote, it's really too hard because the numbers game is so strange that you could have someone really unusual come into the runoff, but then with say 17% of the vote, but then look so bad in the subsequent 2 months that person loses it.
Now, Andy Rougeau was not there, and if you were just banking off of money and fundraising, you'd have to put him in there. He's given himself a considerable amount and raised some others. One, what did you think of 9 News' decision to do that? And then let's talk about one. Are you participating in the big one with PBS 12?
No, I am not. I am going to be out of town.
Oh, how lucky for you.
I can watch that one.
We can at least advertise it for them. Tell us about Andy Rougeau and what your thoughts were on him being excluded by 9.
This is another weird thing coming out of the Fair Elections Fund. To get the money for the Fair Elections Fund, you have to participate in 2 debates if you're a mayoral candidate, 1 debate if you're the city council person, which wound up with the Chris Hines issue on Monday. In this case, Andy is not going for the Fair Elections Fund money. So because this was a Fair Election Fund authorized debate, Channel 9 decided not to invite him. Well, I would say you could still invite someone. The fact that he is not taking taxpayer money, but is clearly well funded for this election, makes him someone you'd want to hear from. So although it was okay for them not to invite him from the Fair Elections Fund standpoint, I thought it was a mistake.
I think it's a mistake, too. I know that PBS 12, I think they are including him and the rest of the crowd. Are they going for all 17, Patty? Is that what Kyle said?
No, Channel 12 is going for the top 10 based on fundraising, not including the Fair Elections Fund. So, people are getting matching funds, not Andy, but 13 of the candidates, the ones we saw last night, are getting matching funds. But in this case, to show how viable they were, you have to still raise some money on your own, and that's what Channel 12 did for the cutoff. So it's the top 10 fundraisers before you get to the Fair Election Fund.
One other thing that we had talked about yesterday on the show involved the rise in juvenile crime, especially in Denver, where we've had some high-profile shootings that have taken place. Not just that tragic one of the 12-year-old who was shot and killed with that dude's stolen car or whatnot, and frankly, Beth just announced, the DA from Denver announced that there will be no charges on that one. But the shooting outside East, I mean, you are Denver, Patty. You have been there long enough to see all the changes and stuff. What is your sense of what the community is thinking about this, and what are the possibilities that we're going to come up with an answer either through city council or more likely the state legislature?
I don't know how you come up with an answer that solves every single gun incident. Certainly raising the age at which you can buy certain kinds of guns, or raise all guns, I guess the proposal, to 21. What's interesting about East High School is that's an urban high school. It has taken care of, it's been safer inside East High School than it's been in many suburban schools around the country. The mass tragedies in general do not happen in urban high schools, but gang shootings, and we don't know if this was a gang shooting, but it was 2 Denver Public High School kids, not from East High, are being held in connection with the shooting of an East High kid who was sitting outside in a car. So no matter what, you would think you want kids to be safe both inside their schools and when they're outside. I mean, look at the shootings last year in Aurora involving high school. It is just hard to know what the solution is about any of these shootings across the country.
There's going to be that gun bill that is finally going to drop. I just don't know when, and I'm not sure what the delay is on it at the legislature. I don't think that's going to be the answer to it. We can't magic away all the guns. My guess is the guns used in these things were not legally obtained, certainly not by kids, but by even the people that gave them to them. I just presume that they're stolen, they're illegal, they're ghost guns or something. And I don't know how you address that particular issue, but we're living in a problem here. And it's not just crime rising with stolen cars and other things. When the youth feel unsafe in schools, it's just another reason to start moving away from schools. And we've already got an education deficit from COVID. I'm worried about the long-term impact of this on a generation of kids, not just the city.
You know, it was interesting. Of all the candidates last night, the one who speaks most compellingly about this is Terrence Roberts, a former gang member. When you talk about kids who suffer poverty at home, then domestic violence, and what the impacts of unsettled homes are on kids. So you have to figure it starts in the home. You know, it's not that these kids aren't going into school as angels and then getting guns. They are in trouble before they get there. And how do you recognize this? How do you stop it?
Patty, I want to take a page from Kyle's book there on CIO, and can you end us on a positive note?
Yes.
Long pause.
Just had to breathe. I am excited that there are so many people interested in running for mayor of Denver. I think it's great that they care about the city. They're worried about the state of the city, but they care about it and they want to get out there. I mean, the fact that we have so many candidates may mean we wind up with a crazy election, but it also means that people are invested in Denver and Metro Denver, all of Colorado.
Look, I'm optimistic for the future. And, you know, I don't live in Denver. I don't work in Denver outside of this radio station. But I think it would be foolish to think that what happens in Denver doesn't have an impact beyond Denver. It is the Queen City of the state. And everything good that happens in Denver flows out into the surrounding metro area. Everything bad that happens in Denver flows out into the surrounding metro area. We need Denver to be as awesome as it possibly can be. And I'm hopeful for the future.
I am too. So we'll just keep talking until it happens.
Happy weekend to you. I hope you have a great weekend, Patty. Great seeing you yesterday. Thanks for tolerating my, Fetterman moment there on the stage.
They will only proliferate for both of us as time goes on.
That's Patty Calhoun from Westword giving me a little bit of cover here, which she didn't need to give. If you don't watch this, you're making a mistake, because I told them, they asked, do you want us to edit that out? And I said, nope, I don't want you to edit that out at all. I want you to keep it in there because, man, that's just reality. That's just who I am. So get a chance, go to PBS 12. If you can't watch it live tonight, they post it on their website almost immediately. Take a look at that as well. Now, listen, I want to do one more thing before I cut away for a break, and we'll come back. And I want to continue to talk a little bit of crime stuff. But for those of you that had the chance to watch, or you're involved in any way in following those mayoral races in Denver, who do you like? Like, if you watched, who did well yesterday? My guess is you didn't. But who do you like in that race? Who is going to be able to take Denver to that next level from where it is right now? Many people think it's a garden level. They just want to get it above ground. Who is going to do that out of those 17 candidates? And you've heard two of them here on the radio, Andy Rougeau and Kwame Spearman. I like both those guys. I just wonder if they're going to be able to get over the goal line here when it comes to first April and then June. I want to tell you about our good buddy, Gay Ribble. The housing market, and I love listening to Brian Gray from Alpine Planning, because he kind of sets out what the economy is doing from a financial perspective, certainly with the stock market. But he talks about the fact that there are these interest rates, there's the inflation, all of these things having an impact, the deficit that we're running. One of the things that you may be thinking about as you eyeball houses that are out there, and you may want to move, you may have to move, is, can I do it? Can I do this successfully? And will I qualify? And is there a home that fits me and my family? Don't put all that stress on your own shoulders. Turn to an expert. And the folks at Gay Ribble and Reynolds and Power Home team, those folks know the answers, because they've been asked that question by the 14,000 plus people that they have on their list. They're home buyers in waiting for your house to list. And then they'll help you get into the new one too. They sell for more on average than other realtors. That means more money in your pocket, and they sell more quickly than other realtors. And that's also peace of mind for you as well. They have the free workshops online at empowerhomefreeworkshops.com, empowerhomefreeworkshops.com. They have a Sold in 5 program. Frankly, they have too many programs for me to read during this one particular live read. So here's what I ask you to do. Pick up the phone and call them. It's a free call. All you get is smarter. 833-301-SOLD. It's baked into the number, isn't it? 833-301-SOLD. Check them out. It's gayhasthebuyers.com, Gay has the buyers, Gaye has the buyers.com. When we come back, you, me, the texts that have been coming in, the phone calls at 303-696-1971. What kind of mayor do we need and who's it going to be? George Brockler, George Show 710 KNUS. Some of the great stuff from LZ Led Zeppelin right there. George Brockler back with you here on 710 KNUS. Talked with Patty Calhoun from Westword. Always love my conversation with her. She is smart. And I think if you listen to that last segment, you'd have to conclude, as I have, that she is smarter than I am. And that is becoming a recurring theme with most of the guests and the callers. Johnny, are you going to be smarter than me or make me look good? Johnny from Denver, you're on 710 KNUS. What did you see last night in the debate?
Okay. Nervousness. I saw from the inexperience to the experience, like the nervousness in the guy who was used to be the gang member.
Yeah, Terrence
like
Roberts. Johnny, would you do me a favor? I think you're on a
Yes.
speaker because normally you sound crystal clear. This sounds a little different.
How about this?
Yeah, better.
How about this?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. So from inexperience to experience, very nervous with him. And then I just heard like a bunch of politicians. And then on your station, the guy named Andy, I liked him and I was going to vote for him up until he said he would force his employees to get the jab. And I'm thinking if it's a good idea, you shouldn't have to force.
Did he say that on our show or you heard that somewhere else?
No, he didn't say it on your show. He said it on Tubbs' show.
Oh.
Because I listen to a lot of you guys.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Now, so he was asked the question, would you mandate the COVID stick for your employees?
Right. And he says, because I was in the military, I had to take a lot of shots, and said, the military, that's different. You belong to the United States government. And then I thought back when blacks belong to the military and they withhold the syphilis drug. And as a black person, I don't trust the government to tell me to do anything.
That's interesting. Is that issue alone the decisive thing? Because if you say it's not Andy, then who's it going to be? Like of those other...
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's going to make me hard,
what?
but it won't stop me from voting for him. It's going to make it hard, but it won't stop me from voting for him. Okay. Because, that almost like, oh, man.
I know. Tough.
And so I just think some more people he needs to talk to, a little bit more people from different perspectives. And I know that, because my brothers were in the military and, they obeyed orders.
Listen, the anthrax vaccine is real. I mean, that anthrax shot that everybody had to take, that was real. And I know there were some folks that were opposed to that, but it's just how it is, man. If you're gonna do the duty, and I agree with you. By the way, it's different when you work as an employee in the civilian sector. Was there anyone yesterday that stood out to you in a good way or a not good way? You've already mentioned Terrence and the experience thing. Anybody else where you thought, man, that answer, wow?
Well, okay. Once again, on Tubbs' show, he had this lady. I don't know. She had two daughters, and she's a mother. And I can't remember. I don't know. If her
two
name
daughters would make her a
something.
mother. That's just a fact.
Yeah. I can't remember. I remember her, but I don't remember like her name. But she was on the show right before, 2 hours right before she went on stage, and I was impressed with her because she didn't sound as liberal or as
there's Debbie Ortega, there's Leslie Herod. There's no chance that Leslie will sound conservative. There was Lisa Calderon. I'm trying to think of who else was on there that I'm forgetting about, and I'm sure there's
maybe Kelly.
Could have been Kelly Bruff. Was she the former CEO of the Denver Chamber of Commerce?
Hickenlooper. She used to work with Hickenlooper.
Yep, she was the chief of staff for Hickenlooper. That was Kelly Bruff.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I thought that. Okay. I said maybe her. If not Andy, but like in the States last night, and I thought that the reasoning for, and she said she, for every $1 they add $9, and I could see that because a lot of these guys they have money, and so for the ones who don't have money, that could be a game changer.
I think the other topic, and I didn't get a chance to get into this with Patty. But you remember this from the debate, is they asked who here would enforce the camping ban, and it was not every hand that went up. And I think Kwame's was one of them that went up, and I know Andy probably would have raised his hand too. But then the discussion afterwards with the folks that would not have, man, it was a bit scary. Some of the ideas that they have to try to fix that. Was there anything about that discussion that stuck out to you?
With these people, it's almost like I see the same instances. They went to Vancouver or to see the
Vancouver. Yeah, that was Leslie Herod. Yeah.
Yeah, I see them that way where they might have went there, but did they go where the action really was, or were they put in the when the Pope comes to a chamber, they clear out all the homeless people, and because they don't want the Pope to see those people. And it struck me like that thing about the homeless thing. It struck me like, okay. And the guy with the video showing the minorities, I said, okay, are we going to pretend that there's no minorities out there doing stuff and living homeless? Because I can go down near 5 Points and I see a bunch of homeless black people and stuff like that down that way. And do we just pretend that they're not there? We got to focus in on.
You bring up that great point. What did you think of the attacks on Chris Hansen for that ad that he ran?
It's the same old. Always look for something you can call a person a racist and stuff like that, and they use it so much. It's almost like boring.
So you didn't think it was a big deal?
I didn't think the video was a big deal because he was just pointing out that this is what's going on. And for the minorities on the thing, they always go for the Democrat minorities. They always go for, let's see who we can call racist so we can kick them out first. And I said, please.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
interesting.
Give me something bigger than that. I need a bigger boogeyman than that.
Johnny, I appreciate that perspective. I wonder if it's a perspective that'll be shared by the majority of the folks out there in Denver. And thank you for the phone call, my man. Have a good weekend. I think that Patty's right. I think that if you're one of the front runners and you have the ability, you're going to put out a lot on Chris Hansen and that ad as being insensitive and stereotypical and look, even Kwame threw a couple punches at Chris. Listen, I need to tell you about something else that's happening today. Like today, I've told you about it before, but man, it's getting underway. There's no more dawdling, no more wasting time. If you're thinking in terms, especially when we talk about all this crime in the Denver metro area, and you know it's there, when you start thinking about things like personal safety, home safety, protecting your family, protecting other loved ones. How about this? Tanner Gun Show is taking place this weekend at the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds. That is also incredibly easy to get to, and there's always a ton of parking. Listen, I'm a veteran. I'm the former chief law enforcement officer for about 1.1 million Coloradans. I've seen a lot, and I know that sometimes the only right answer is the one that you come up with when you're in that moment, that there's nothing between your family and the bad guy than you. The idea of self-defense matters to me. It's why I own firearms. Tanner Gun Shows this weekend. Starts today from 3 to 7. It goes tomorrow, 9 to 5, and Sunday, 10 to 4. And they have the most excellent selection and lowest prices on all types of new and those difficult-to-find guns, knives, ammo, AR accessories, hunting supplies. They do the concealed carry classes so responsible. You got to do that. And a ton of cool stuff you just can't find anywhere else. Prices tend to be 30% less than the big box stores. That's pretty cool. You can buy, sell, even trade your old gun for an upgrade. And again, because it's at the fairgrounds, unincorporated Arapahoe, one of the lowest sales tax rates in the state of Colorado. How can you not want to do this? Now, you can get your tickets online at tannergunshow.com, tannergunshow.com, or you can do it right there at the gate. The weather looks like it's going to be great too. Get out there to see the Tanner Gun Show. Listen, when we come back, we'll get to the other callers on the line, some of the texts that are coming in. It's George Brockler on the George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
It is George Brockler on 710 KNUS. My thanks again to Patty Calhoun, but also Johnny. Good call on the mayoral situation. It sounds like, just off some things we're hearing off air, that this whole Chris Hansen ad featuring, I think, exclusively people of color. I think that may, for some politicos out there, that may be the end of his campaign. That's devastating for him, but also interesting in what it does to the top tier. I still think, just in terms of money and who's going to be able to get name ID out, and folks, name ID is the name of the game. That's how you become mayor. If you remember Hickenlooper back in the day doing those feeding the meter commercials or standing in the shower in his suit commercials, they were clever and they got him a lot of earned media. That's the media you don't pay for, in addition to the paid media that he'd raised money for. And it just made him seem like such an affable, caring, down to earth, has our problems kind of guy. That's the kind of thing that gets you wins. It's hard to know who breaks out here. I think Patty's probably right. There's a lot of other turns left before we get to April. I mean, there's almost 2 months left, maybe 1 week shy of that. And it'll be interesting to see who comes out as a front runner. Leslie Herod is there, I think, just because she's been working the city for so long and been representing them, and her fundraising's decent. And I don't want to talk about endorsements, but Kelly Brough for sure is a name to contend with. Mike Johnston, I'm a big Mike Johnston fan. I sure wish the dude was a Republican, but he just doesn't think quite like that. But he and his wife are fantastic. Andy Rougeau, I really like Andy too. I think Andy could make some differences there. I think he'd be hampered a bit by a city council that won't reflect his ideology or his political principles. And then I got to say, I never really considered it before our interview, but after the interview and watching his performance on stage yesterday, Kwame Spearman, man, I like that dude. I mean, if that dude could, and he wants to be the neighborhood mayor, I think is how he's couched it. I don't know, man. That guy is, he can really talk in terms of like personal experience, right? When you can articulate things from the standpoint of, I graduated from East. That's where that young man, or I grew up here. I own the tattered covers that were right across the street from that. And I've been in, and again, Kyle Clark, if you ever go back and watch the debate, when he said at one point, there are just places in Denver that are not suitable for like high concentration housing. Instantly, Kyle Clark goes, can you name them? You know what I mean? Like always trying to trip up a candidate. And he had him right there. He goes, yeah, Hilltop, where I live, that is not suitable. Even where you live, Kyle, out in Park Hill, that's not suitable. And I thought, damn, man, I like a dude who can counterpunch, and not in an aggressive sort of the media's mean to me way, but he just has the answers, man. He's ready. I just thought he did really, really well. Really wish I could have seen Andy there. We're going to get Andy back on as well. Maybe we should ask Kwame to come on as well and have a conversation with us about some of the issues he was asked about yesterday. I'd still love to get Leslie on. I'd love to get Mike Johnston back on. And frankly, any of the other candidates we could score. Kelly's a good one. I'd take Debbie Ortega. I would take Lisa Calderon just because they're staples out there in Denver. They have been involved for a long, long time. They just have a different view than I have, and probably most of us have out here. Anyway, it's just a thought. That's what we'd end up covering. Now, there's another topic I want to tease with you that I want to talk about. We're not going to do it in the 9, because in the 9 o'clock hour, we're fortunate to be able to be joined by Denver Police Commander Jimenez, who's going to talk to us about the new FIT team. No, it's not about losing weight, but it is about staying alive and keeping more people alive for longer. We'll have him after the top of the hour, but there is a report out here, and I don't want to get into the huge topic right now because I'd love to have a current elected district attorney who participated in this study to be able to address this. But there is a report that was generated out of the University of Denver. There's a group out there that has helped put together the Colorado Prosecutorial Dashboards Project. Now, what is intriguing to me about this is it is a bipartisan group of district attorneys, including every DA in the metro area. Now, that used to include a lot more Republicans, but right now you're talking about Beth McCann and Brian out of Adams and Alexis King out of Jeffcoat. None of them are Republicans, but John Kellner is, and he's got the largest jurisdiction in the state. You'll remember our friend of the show, Michael Allen. He's not a participant. He's got his own dashboard with a ton of information available, but the idea is the same, and that is, what can we glean? What questions can we ask from the information that prosecutors post to their websites about all the different stages of prosecution, the decision to charge, the decision to put into diversion, the decision to no file, all of these things leading up to things like plea bargaining and sentences. I think that's invaluable. I don't think that's some sort of woke thing. I think we want to know what government is doing with the greatest powers that it has. But those statistics cannot give us answers as to the why or the how, only what. And so there's a report that comes out that they say show racial inequities. And I hate the term equity now after it's been hijacked by the folks on the left, because it can mean anything you want. Racial inequities. And all it really says is, and we could have done this without the report, is it looks like certain people of color groups, African Americans, Latinos, are overrepresented in certain prosecution areas based upon their appearance in society. That tells you absolutely nothing. You can draw no conclusions from that. And the report doesn't, to its credit, but the title of the article makes you think, oh, there must be some kind of racism afoot here. Unlikely, but it's worth asking the next question, which is, why is this happening? And that's the part I really want to have a conversation with. I noticed that Mike Doherty, who is the elected DA out of Boulder, and even though he's the Boulder DA, dude's a legit prosecutor, man. I mean, this guy is hardcore on criminal justice. He's also got those tendencies towards the left, though, because one, he's a Democrat who's elected. You got to pay homage to them. But very thoughtful guy. And I was intrigued by the fact that he rushed to the podium to say, this just shows us we have a lot of work to do. I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure it shows that you have a lot of work to do. It might just merely reflect the amount and volume of crime that's occurring. And the reasons for plea bargaining are so varied, so vast. You can't just say, oh, well, this African-American got this plea deal on this charge, and this white guy and Latino got these. It doesn't work like that. You're considering 8 billion variables. It isn't like a grid where you punch in one thing and come up with the answer. It's not like that. So I want to have a conversation. I've reached out to Alexis King. No response, by the way. Reached out to John Kellner. He wasn't available. We're going to keep trying, and we'll get them back on. Now, we're going to stay with criminal justice a bit here. We're going to be joined by DPD Commander Jimenez, who's going to talk to us about that FIT team when we come back. You stick around. What questions do you have after that interview? I'll take them at 303-696-1971. It's me, George Brockler, on The George Show. You're listening to 710 KNUS. George Brockler right back with you here for the final hour of the George Show on 710 KNUS. Final hour of this show will be coming to you live from El Paso, Texas next week. All of us. That's me. That's Deb. That's going to be 54-year-old Stephen Tubbs. Listen, I am pleased to be bringing up on the line for the first time on the show, Denver Police Commander Paul Jimenez. Sir, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, George. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for placing such a great spotlight on this important public health crisis.
Well, listen, I didn't do a good job of setting up the topic other than to tease people with hits through this FIT program. Tell us what Denver has done to tackle what is something that it's only getting worse, and for a myriad reasons. But tell us what you're doing out there that's pretty special.
Sure. First, I'd like to just highlight what's going on in our country right now relative to fentanyl and overdose deaths. So last year in the United States, over 100,000 people died of drug overdoses, and fentanyl was responsible for 2/3 of those deaths. The number of Americans killed from fentanyl has increased 94% since 2019. One person dies of fentanyl overdose death every 7 minutes. Fentanyl kills more people than automobile accidents, gunshots, and suicides combined. There is a high lethality with
say that
fentanyl.
statistic again.
In the United States, fentanyl kills more people than automobile accidents, gunshots, and suicides. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. It's the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 44.
The leading cause of death.
We're seeing, yes, and so what we're seeing across the country is what we're seeing here in not only Colorado, but in the Denver metro area. So the Denver Police Department, Chief Ron Thomas has placed a high priority on tackling this problem. So we've always placed a priority on drug enforcement and specifically fentanyl in the metro area. But what we're doing now is we've formed a fentanyl investigations team that full-time this team is going to investigate fentanyl and overdose deaths. Their obviously goal is to target fentanyl dealers, manufacturers, and distributors in the metro area, and then disrupt those networks, moving from street-level dealers to distributors and suppliers, and then holding those individuals accountable for the overdose deaths in the circumstances that we can make those death-resulting cases.
Well, we'll talk about that ability and the accountability piece in a minute. But, fentanyl wasn't invented 10 minutes ago. Why do you think, or what have you guys discovered is the reason why it seems to be surging here and everywhere else?
Well, we're seeing record seizures at the border. That's no secret, right? It's cheaply made, it's readily available, and it's really everywhere. Our fentanyl seizures here in Colorado are up 127%. So in Denver, we had in 2021 over 400, nearly 500 overdose deaths. Fentanyl was responsible for more than half of those. So you've seen this exponential increase in its availability. It's obviously easily consumed, oftentimes by individuals that don't know that they're actually taking fentanyl, right? So most of the time what we're seeing is it's in counterfeit oxy pills, and an individual may think that they're taking an oxy pill and for the first time, and they may end up overdosing and dying. And so the problem with that is, the DEA did a study where up to 40% of seized pills contained a potential lethal dose of fentanyl. So, the lethality is really high.
Well, Commander Jimenez, let me ask you, though. I can see people not intending to overdose, but I can also see people intending to ingest fentanyl. You've described the situation in which there are those out there, and those stories are tragic, and we see them all the time where they think they're getting Oxycontin, they get something else with a kicker in it. How many folks out there are openly seeking fentanyl because of the quick and significant high that they get?
Well, I couldn't put a number on it, but it's substantial, right? I mean, there are a high number of individuals, but the overwhelming majority, I would say, that know what they're taking, right? They're looking for a high, and they understand what the potential implications are, for sure, no doubt. But when they do ingest this substance, it's oftentimes something that they could be taking for the first time or the 15th time, right? But you just don't know if the pill that you're getting has that lethal dose in it.
Where's the fentanyl coming from?
So we know it's no secret that the precursors are from China, right? and those are sent to Mexico, and they're being made along with other cheaply made and readily available drugs like methamphetamine. When you have a drug such as cocaine or heroin, which take a lot of land and a lot of resources to manufacture and then ship, something like fentanyl or methamphetamine is cheaply made in a lab and then easily transported across the border.
So if you had to guess a percentage, and I want to ask you about how fentanyl is produced, but if you had to guess a percentage, what would you say was the percentage that came from down south or outside of Colorado versus generated here?
Oh, I would say easily over 90%.
Comes from south of the border.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
The fentanyl that gets produced here, the other 10%, is it at all like, you remember back in the day, man, how long you been doing this?
I've been a police officer for 26 years.
Did you grow up in Denver?
I did.
Where was high school?
Regis, when it was located in Denver.
And that's a Muslim school, isn't it? I'm kidding. No, I know it's a Catholic school. I'm a Catholic too. I went to mine for a couple of years. Man, in terms of, you remember the days back in the 90s, you've been doing this a long time, back in the 90s where we had even mobile meth labs. There was a lot of meth manufacturing here. And then once people figured out that it was cheaper and you could get better product by going down south or going with, I guess, apparently Walter White, that all dried up. Is it a similar process to that to make fentanyl or to distill fentanyl? I'm not even sure how it's generated.
Yeah. So, and I wouldn't even say 10%. I would say it's less than 10%, but we do see precursors bought here and made with like pill presses. But I wouldn't say it's something akin to the, mobile labs that we've seen in the past with methamphetamine. I think it's a much more developed process, but just as dangerous, right? I mean, you're talking about something where we've gone into locations with pill presses where there's fentanyl residue all over everything, the floor, the counters, the dressers, things like that. So yeah, just as dangerous, but not done in the way that we've probably seen in the past with methamphetamine.
You've seen these videos, I'm sure, too. People have sent them to me, and that is other law enforcement officers around the country who, for instance, open a trunk and there's some suspected drugs in there, fentanyl being one of them, and just the whiff of that stuff causes a big 6'4", 250-pound guy to just topple over backwards and into a seizure. Have you had incidents like that with Denver PD guys?
None that I'm aware of. I know we've had some exposures, but none that rose to the level of what you've seen in some of those videos. But it can happen at any time, right? And we do equip all of our officers with Narcan just in case they were to encounter such an incident like that.
I presume, too, it's probably changed whatever the SOP is for dealing with any suspected drugs because you just don't know. Just like the people taking the pills, you just don't know what's in there.
Yeah, oftentimes when we come upon locations, we have to treat it as like a hazardous material or a lab environment. We do call in our clandestine lab team for that.
When you talk about this new FIT team being put together, is it a newly generated team that grew out of nothing, or did you repurpose folks from another unit?
We repurposed seasoned narcotics investigators from another unit. We actually had a full-time marijuana enforcement team, and that team was constructed right after recreational marijuana became legal. And we were just seeing a significant increase in black market marijuana cases. And so I believe we were the only department, maybe not even just in the metro area, but in the entire region that had a full-time marijuana enforcement team. Well, what we've seen in the last couple of years is that those cases have dropped significantly. And so as of right now, we thought the resources were better put towards an issue where we're having people dying, like almost on a daily basis. And so that decision was made, and I think it was an excellent decision.
So tell us about how big the team is. Who's it got on it? Not by names, but the roles.
Yeah,
they play.
yeah. So right now we have 5 detectives and we have 1 sergeant. We're looking to add another detective to that team in short order, and we're looking to add somebody with death investigations experience, because obviously that's a part of what this team is going to do or what is currently doing. And then, as far as future potential growth, we are looking to maybe leverage some of those partnerships with our federal partners and add maybe a special agent from DEA or HSI or someone like that.
When you talked before about trying to get these people and then have them held accountable, I want to ask you about some of the recent changes in the law. Now, I'm not looking for you to get political, but I am looking for you to get policy-wise, and that is, have the changes to the law that the legislature has made in the last several legislative sessions, one, to make possession of 1 to 4, I think it was 1 to 4 ounces of fentanyl a misdemeanor, versus now reducing it down to what? Has that impacted at all your ability to do that, to hold people accountable?
Yes, it has actually. So for that amount, and it was actually, I believe, 4 grams.
Grams. I'm sorry. If I said ounces,
yeah.
that would kill the planet. Yeah, I'm sorry, grams.
Yeah, and so what that has done is, in the past, what we would do is if we encountered somebody with that amount, then that was considered a felony and it was an arrest. Well, now it's a misdemeanor and we're issuing tickets for that same amount. And so I think what it has also done is it's kind of opened up the floodgates to some degree and welcomed people here. Drug dealers are pretty savvy, right? For lack of a better description, they're businessmen. And so where they see a way around a particular law or something that we are doing from an enforcement activity, they're going to take advantage of it. And so I think that has increased the issues surrounding, drugs and drug enforcement in not only the metro area, but in the state of Colorado.
Now, we have not been able to incarcerate our way out of the drug problem, but if we had more serious consequences for those that peddle the drugs. And my presumption is the FIT team isn't there to try to lock up the addicts. It's to try to figure out a way, one, to help the addicts to keep from killing themselves, but two, figure out where they're getting the poison that is killing them. But if you had stiffer penalties, if you had it treated more seriously, do you think that would have an effect on the availability of it on the streets of Denver?
Oh, absolutely. And our goal isn't to target the street level user. We're looking to identify and disrupt fentanyl networks, right? Drug trafficking organizations that are bringing 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 pills into the metro area at any given time. And we are going to be placing a priority on enforcement, right? Just because you have a DTO who is dealing in the metro area.
Tell folks what a DTO is.
A drug trafficking organization. We are intercepting loads of 150, 200,000 pills at a time.
Oh my God.
And if you take a look at the numbers, and we're talking about the numbers I referenced earlier with DEA, where up to 40% potentially contain a lethal dose of fentanyl, just imagine the impact we're having by pulling those hundreds of thousands. And we were up over 1 million pills seized last year, if you include all of our partners, Front Range Task Force, which is our partnership with DEA and Rocky Mountain HIDA. So imagine the impact that that's having. Now, on the other end of it, we're looking to track down dealers who are pushing poison into this community that are causing the death of individuals. Now, with the sheer volume of overdose deaths, we don't have the resources to investigate to the end 500 overdose deaths. But ones with high solvability factors, juveniles, multiple deaths, special circumstances, that we can actually sink our teeth into and work our way back to identify a dealer and hold them accountable, then that's what we're going to do. And I think the state legislature did do something good in creating the state bill, which mirrors the federal statute for death resulting cases, so that you can actually hold an individual accountable when they sell drugs that result in the death of somebody.
Yes, sorta. And I'm going to say sorta, man, because you probably saw this in the law too. They built in all these off ramps for incarceration. Like if you give pills to someone with fentanyl in it and it kills a whole bunch of them, if you stick around, if you just hang around and don't try to flee and cooperate with law enforcement as all these people die around you, you don't have to have the same kind of sentences if you fled. Like you don't have to have mandatory incarceration. That's just a weird one for me. The other thing was how much drugs you had on you at the time you get busted when you've dealt drugs that have killed someone. That has an impact on the sentence. Like if I just keep 2 pills on me, then I get a lower sentence than if I had a whole bag of them on me, as opposed to connecting it to the actual consequence of the drugs themselves. Those seem odd to me.
No, I agree completely. And those are some challenges that we have to work around. And it's no secret that those off ramps that you're talking about and describe is something that you probably experienced as a prosecutor, in which it appears as though things are being made more difficult for people in law enforcement and less difficult for the people that are actually committing the crime. So without getting overtly political, we are going to do what we need to do on our end and see what kind of assistance we can get on the prosecution side. Now, there is a federal death resulting statute that we're looking to partner with our U.S. attorneys in providing them with cases, and we've had success in doing that in the past as well.
I'm interested too, and again, it's hard. It's just so hard to ask this question without it seeming like I want it to be political. I don't, but you have an undeniable and integral relationship with the Denver District Attorney's Office. Have they joined you in escalating the significance that they place on fentanyl investigation and prosecution since you guys stood up this FIT team?
George, we are just right now in the infancy stages of developing those prosecution relationships specific to this team. What my goal is to develop a partner over there who puts as high of a priority on it as do we or the U.S. attorneys or other judicial districts. And I'm confident that we can get that done.
When you are thinking, I want to turn this into a little bit of a PSA. There are folks out there listening who are, maybe they're struggling with their own addiction issues, or maybe they know someone that are. What advice or recommendations can you make to someone to be on the lookout for something that may be fentanyl?
Well, George, you're probably much like me. I don't believe there's any safe way to consume illicit drugs, right?
Agreed.
I don't think there's any safe level of drug usage. And I think the DEA says it best, and without recreating the wheel, one pill can kill, right?
Yeah.
You can take one pill and you can die. Now, does that fall on deaf ears when you're talking about a drug addict, right? That isn't listening to the news or some PSA or your show, right? And so what we need to do is partner with our NGOs to get out the message and let people know.
Tell folks what NGO is.
A non-governmental organization. Yep. There are a number of organizations that
you're not for
can
profit,
provide
stuff like that.
Yeah, in this arena, in pushing out messaging relative to drug addiction and the resources that can be provided to those individuals should they need help. But I guess what I'm going to say is there's no safe level of illicit drug use, right? Whether it's cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, or in this case, fentanyl. And so that's what I would really do. And I think we need to do a better job at the youth level of pushing out messaging related to that same topic.
Does any of this make you more akin to want to support things like a safe drug use site that has been talked about by some of the mayoral candidates? I didn't even get to right there. How about what about these fentanyl strips that they're talking about handing out so people can test their own drugs? Any thoughts on that?
You know, I think that's something that can be utilized by the partners that I spoke about. If that's something they feel like would be more effective in, decreasing the number of overdose deaths, then that's something that I'm willing to listen to. But as far as supervised injection sites or supervised drug use sites, I'm not a believer in that. I don't believe we should be. I don't believe we should be in the business of promoting safe drug usage. I mean, that flies in the face of what I just said, which is you're promoting an act that is already proven to be unhealthy for individuals, right? So rather than putting resources toward prevention, you're going to promote drug use. I think it's not something that's a good idea. And I think if you take a look at some of the places who've done this in other areas, inside and outside of our country, it's proven to be a failure.
What about the idea that we could just save a life? And I'm being a little sarcastic there. Isn't it enough that we could keep more drug users alive to continue to use more drugs?
I think if you look at the numbers, that isn't, something that's born out of a specific scientific study that's been done. I think if you take a look, that people will probably not use those sites as often as it's being promoted. And even if they do, they're also using drugs outside of those arenas. And there's potential for overdose outside of it. I think what you're doing is you're inviting a problem with a lot of unintended consequences into this community. And right now, I don't think that's something that Denver or any other metro area community needs.
If the legislature goes down that road and authorizes it, and Denver has made some noises that it wants to do it, which neighborhood should it be in? I mean, I'm sort of asking sarcastically because isn't that the $10 million question? Where are you putting this thing? Is it in Civic Center Park?
Well, I don't know, and that's not really a question that I probably can answer. I'm not in the business of promoting areas, whether they be, safe injection sites or safe use sites. I think that what we've seen is there are areas with challenges in the Denver metro area with open air drug markets, open air drug usage, and providing one more place to do that, whether it be considered safe or not, in my opinion, is not the answer.
Well, I'm happy you guys are out there, Commander Paul Jimenez. Thank you, the commander of the FIT team. That's the Fentanyl Investigations Team. Did I get that right?
You did. And that's just one of, 4 or 5 drug enforcement units we have that is centralized out of headquarters or with one of our task force partners. We also have decentralized narcotics enforcement units in every district. So there's a full, push towards enforcing drug enforcement relative to fentanyl and overdose deaths.
Listen, I love the interview, and I'm hopeful that you'll consider us a resource, not only to put out more of that public safety type stuff, but also tell us about your victories, because I'd love to promote that out there into the public so folks know the good work you're doing.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back onto the show and see if we can do some follow-up. And I just want to say thanks for having me, and thank you for being an advocate for law enforcement and really being such a tough prosecutor on crime when you were the DA and judicial. You did a lot of great work, and we had some great partnerships with that office.
We did. We really did. Thank you for saying that, man. I appreciate that. That is Commander Paul Jimenez from the Denver Police Department. He is the commander in charge of the Fentanyl Investigations Team, the FIT team. I like that, man. I like hearing what they're doing. But I think one of the things that he said that is resonating with me as a guy who's about to head down to El Paso to do the show down there is that 90+% of the fentanyl that's in Denver, killing folks, making folks sick, the overdoses, is coming from south of the border. I mean, how many more reasons do we need to try to secure that thing? Bring back the other guy. Let's get those borders secured. Hey, listen, when we come back, your feedback here. What did you think about that? Any thoughts on that? 303-696-1971. One of the texters, very provocative. You know this guy, George, just floors me. When you play Russian roulette, you take the chance of dying. I think that that's true, but is the suggestion then that it is okay to just let these folks play Russian roulette with these pills that they know could be laced with something that kills them? Man, there's a part of me that's really, really rough on that and saying, hey, man, if you're willing to do it. But I also know that these people aren't using their best brains to do it. These people are acting out of addiction. What do we do with this? 303-696-1971. What did you hear in there? What do you want to see happen? Before we cut away, I need to tell you about a superstar out there, another problem solver, by the way, like Commander Jimenez. His name's Dan Caplis. You've heard me rave about Dan day in and day out. And I feel like to some extent, the stuff that I say, I think is resonating because I think the phone's ringing for him. But I want to get deeper into this and talk to you about the guy, less about all the great work that he and Bobber have done in the courtroom and all the successes. But just from the standpoint of a guy that worked for him about 16 years ago, he looked identical, by the way, which is freaking outrageous. And it pisses me off because I look older than I did 15 days ago. This dude 16 years ago looks the same. And I want to know his secret. I don't know what it is. Is it Pilates? Is it yoga? Is it Amy? I don't know the answer. But this is a guy who I remember when we would get cases in the door, there was never this, hey, quick, call up the insurance adjuster, see what we can get this for. It wasn't like that. We would have meetings weekly at a minimum, but sometimes more than that, where it would be Bobber, a buddy Dan of mine, who was a partner of Dan's, Dan Caplis, and we would sit around and I kid you not, brainstorm all the different things that we would need to know or want to prove to be able to maximize the outcome for the person who was hurt by someone else's negligence, recklessness, sometimes intentional conduct. And they turned out to be pretty helpful. One, it was helpful for me. I'd been a criminal guy, man. I'd only done murders and stuff up to that point. And it was helpful for me to understand all the different things that were out there. But this guy has a brain that is built for where do we come up with that next fact, that next piece of evidence that will help us tell the story. We had somebody that was killed on the side of the road during a horrible storm that was taking place, and they ended up being, I think it was crushed by a trucker when they were on the side of the road, well outside of what should have been the danger area. And I remember just sitting there thinking, this one seems so obvious to me, but it wasn't obvious to Dan, because he was like, no, there's more to this, and we need to get this information. We need to go look at the road and bridge people out there. We need to get the history of accidents on this place. Who else could have been liable for this? Because this road turns out to have generated a lot of deaths and not in a dissimilar fashion. He's like, we need to get to the bottom of this. And I thought, this guy's tireless, just freaking indefatigable when it comes to trying to get to the truth of what happened and who is responsible for it. If you want someone like that, not someone who's looking for the quick kill, if you're just looking for a quick check, there's a lot of firms that can do that. That ain't Dan's firm. Dan and Bobber do it differently. They do the deep dive. Give them a call at 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. You can check them out at Dan Caplis Law, as always, Caplis with a C, dancaplisLaw.com. But I'd say give them the call, man. Have the free conversation. You'll love these guys. Hey, when we come back, we're going to get to our callers on the line, including a state legislator. When we come back, it's George Brockler on The George Show, 710 KNUS. George Brockler right back with you here, 710 KNUS. Happy to bring up another VIP. Friend of the show, friend of mine, all-around great legislator, and not Billy, Matt. I'm the one that hosed you. I'm the one that double set us at 9 o'clock, so please forgive me. It's Representative Matt Soper. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Hey, thank you, George. And I just have a brief moment because we're in the middle of a major debate on the House floor, but I wanted to be able to talk to listeners for a second.
Now, there's two things I was hoping to get out of you. One is you've got this great piece of legislation you wanted to chat about, but two, can you update us on the status of your great bill to try to bring some equity, to use the term of the left, to the stolen car debate?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be in the Senate Judiciary Committee next week, and we are lining up witnesses. We have lots of people who are going to be there to testify. We know that there's a healthy bit of opposition, people who just don't want to see more criminal laws. As a matter of fact, one legislator, and I'll protect her name for her sake, but she said the most amazing thing, which was, why don't we focus on affordable housing and finding other ways to help people not steal cars so they can live their lives?
Why would you protect that person? That's all public comment.
No, that's true. Well, it's Representative Garcia, so
shocker.
You can look it up in the SMART Act hearings.
That's shocker. So that's progressing along well. You feel good about it? You feel like you're going to overcome the left's resistance to that?
I do, yeah. I feel very confident. The number of people who've reached out who say it's long over time, get this done, get it done now. I mean, it's citizens, it's legislators. I mean, the prevailing force is with us.
That's good to hear. Now, listen, that's not the only piece of legislation you have. What else is magical that's going on there? Yeah,
so a bill, unfortunately, that they just killed in the House Judiciary. Yeah, it was really sad. It concerns minimum wage theft, and super wonky, I know, but Colorado has a wage theft law. Then we have a minimum wage theft law. They're just a few pages apart in statute. The wage theft law had a statute of limitations created in 1986. And from 1986 to 2018, it was always presumed we had a 2 or 3 year statute of limitations, 3 years if it was willful violation of not paying your employee what you said you were going to pay them. And then a federal court case got in the way and said, oh, actually, instead of it being wage violations or wage theft, we're going to have a new theory, which is it's debt. And debt has a 6-year statute of limitations. And so that caused, complete confusion in the courts from 2018 to present. And then the Colorado Supreme Court weighed in. They suggested it might be different, but they didn't really make it black and white. We've had federal and state district courts who cannot agree if it's 2 years or 6 years. So I ran a bill to align it as 2 years that you have to bring your case. If you're not being paid what you should be paid. 3 years if it's willful, which is in line with federal law, and it's in line with all the other areas of state law. And I had 7 votes for and 6 votes against.
Well, wait a minute.
The argument against.
Tell me the argument. What the heck? This seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So the Democrats said the reason why they were not supporting it was they wanted to allow the common law to play out and judges to figure out if it's 2 or 6 years.
Wait a minute. So hold on. They want the judges to determine what the years are, not the lawmakers.
No. Yeah.
Oh, buddy, it sounds like, is it an emergency? Do you have to head in there to?
Almost, but we can take one more minute.
Well, hold on. Tell us what the debate is that you've got us all, our interest is piqued. What's going on there? What are you guys debating?
Yeah, so we're debating right to repair. And this concerns agricultural equipment. Last year, they did a bill for right to repair of wheelchairs. So this is a series of bills. The holy grail is cars and computers and cell phones. Don't let the name mislead you. It has nothing to do with a right to repair. You can repair any product that you purchase because it's your product, you own it. What it is they want to be able to allow Coloradans to violate the terms of the contract and the warranty to where you can make repairs, not use certified products, not use the technician, and still have it be under warranty.
Yeah, and if you break it and it busts it, then you can go back to the person who said, please don't do it without us, and then say, now you have to fix it.
Exactly.
Buddy, that's craziness. Listen, I don't want to keep you because I want you to be part of this debate. It sounds like you're talking common sense out there. Any last thoughts before we let you go for the weekend?
Yeah, the parting thought would be in this building, the state capitol, common sense seems to have left the building, so we're trying to fight to bring it back.
Matt, honestly, Colorado voters voted out common sense. I mean, they had the opportunity at common sense, or at least parity between common sense and craziness, but they voted overwhelmingly for craziness. Man, you were just fighting an uphill battle, and I'm proud of you for doing it.
Well, thank you.
Hey, thank
Appreciate
you. That is Representative Matt Soper going back into the battle on the right to repair bill. We talked a little bit about that one before. Hopefully they have a chance to either amend or kill that thing. Killing it's probably impossible. I mean, you just can't do that with 19 folks out of 65. But maybe they can make some meaningful changes to it that will keep it from blowing up more of the stuff out here in the state of Colorado. I mean, there are less and less reasons to want to move here. And I can't believe I'm saying that. This is my home. But every day I think, why are people coming here? The skiing is great. That is true. The weed is plentiful. That is true. But I mean, if you're a business owner or I don't know the answer. Listen, Evan, everybody else that's calling in, some of the texts that have gone in, 303-696-1971. We're going to cut away for that last break, and then we'll come back, and I will honor the callers. One other thing I'm going to tell you about, though, is there is an awesome podcast that we host right here at the 710 KNUS thing. You can find it anywhere. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, fill in the blank, and it's called Advanced Colorado, and my good buddy Michael Fields is the guy that does the interviews for that, and they're wicked smart folks that he gets talking about local issues of the day, things going on under the Gold Dome right now, things that may have missed the newspapers or missed TV and maybe even sometimes missed radio. It's a 20-minute thing. You can dive right into it. It's not going to make you laugh because I'm not doing it with him, but it will make you smarter. Go check it out. That's the Advanced Colorado Rundown. Advanced Colorado Rundown. When we come back, you, me, text, phones, George Brockler, George Show 710, KNUS. George Brockler right back with you here on 710 KNUS. It's that final segment of the final show of the week before we take off to beautiful and balmy El Paso, Texas, where we'll be talking a whole lot about immigration. It's what's happening down there and its impact up here. Me, Deb, Stefan, we're all going to be there. Stick around for that. I want to go to the phone lines. Evan, you're on 710. What do you think?
Oh, yes, sir. You're sure opening another great can of worms, George. You're getting pretty good at that.
Unintentional.
Well, yeah, but it makes it for good debate, good conversation. I can't say that drugs have impacted me directly, but I've had several friends who've been seriously affected by it. One of my close friends had a car stolen. It was recovered. It was in fine shape, except it was full of meth equipment, and meth was all inside the car, so it had to be written off. And that's just one example. Of course, it fits right into the theft rate in the state of Colorado, which is kind of terrifying now. I'll never forget the first day that marijuana became legal in this state. I was inside Cherry Creek Mall, went outside to get my car, and there was a carload of, shall we say, unsavory people. Not going into great detail, don't want to, should not, but that's not the kind of people that I usually associate with Cherry Creek Mall. I won't say any more about that.
Were they up to no good, or were they just hanging around?
They looked like they were getting ready to go somewhere, like back to their own state. The plate came out of the north central Midwest.
Okay.
And they kind of saw me and kind of laughed. I wear my cowboy hat and my boots, you know, but I was a local. But they're not the kind of person that I generally want to run into in Cherry Creek Mall. So the other thing that concerns me is when I listened carefully to what the prosecution parameters are for arresting someone who's dealing drugs. It sounds to me as though someone has taken a very fine-tooth comb to that thing to make sure that it's not going to be stopped. In other words, somewhere along the line, someone who's an official, I believe, is on the take. I don't know how else to put it, but that's what it sounds like to me. So, I appreciate your comment.
Yeah, no, Evan, I appreciate I like the on-ground anecdotal updates of what's going on. I think the things you describe are things that a lot of folks have had questions about. Thank you, and have a great weekend, about what's going on in Denver and why it's happening. It definitely means there needs to be, in my opinion, an uptick in law enforcement involvement. That's not just the police on the ground. They're doing their job, but the prosecution as well. We got to stop sending these people back out onto the street with a handshake and a hug and a please don't do drugs anymore. That's just not going to work. Now, listen, we only have a few minutes left. I'd love to cover everything that's on here, but you heard maybe at the top of the hour the death of Tim McCarver. That voice is very, very familiar to me because I've been listening to him for many, many years. I know my dad texted in. He'd watched him as a baseball player, thought he was one of the greats too. We've got a cut from a devastating, heartbreaking for a New York Yankees fan, I think from the 2001 World Series. Billy? It's Game 7.
The chance of a lifetime for Luis Gonzalez.
Mariano on the mound.
2-2, bottom of the ninth. Game 7 of the World Series. Bases loaded. Infield in. 1 out. Strike one.
Greatest closer in baseball history on the mound right now. He'd just given up the lead.
The one problem is Rivera throws inside the left-handers, and left-handers get a lot of broken bat hits in the shallow outfield. The shallow part of the outfield. That's the danger in bringing the infield in with a guy like Rivera on the mound.
He's a killer, folks.
Floater, center field. The Diamondbacks are world champions.
Unbelievable. Exactly what he said was the risk, was what happened. That little blooper right there as they pulled the infield in, no one able to get it. That is crushing. I remember watching that World Series. If you remember, it's 2001, right? September 11th happens. They push the World Series back. Jeter with that End of the game, home run to become Mr. November. And it looked like this was going to be a storybook ending for the New York Yankees. And then somehow the freaking Arizona Diamondbacks came in and with the lead. And by the way, you know where else this happened? Game 4 of the ALCS in 2004 between the Red Sox and the Yankees. Yankees have the lead. It's the bottom of the 9th. Red Sox do or die, and they beat Mariano on the mound. They sweep the next 4 games, then sweep the Cardinals and become World Series champions. Just unbearable and unbelievable. And then, of course, they go on to sweep us with the Rockies. Now, listen, one more thing I want to set up. I think we have sound for it. You guys may have heard of a guy named Don Lemon. Don is a bit of a conservative. No, not at all. Super lefty on CNN. They've repurposed him from his evening show to a morning show that's been struggling for ratings. They may get some more now because he's flanked on either side by 2 women, Poppy Harlow. And who's the other one? Do you remember? I can't remember her name. Well, after Nikki Haley's announcement speech, Don Lemon opined this way.
So talk about age makes me uncomfortable. I think it's the wrong road to go down. She says people, politicians or something are not in their prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking? Wait.
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. It's just like prime. If you look it up, if you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s. I don't necessarily.
40s. So I got another.
I'm not saying
decade.
I agree with that. So I think she has to be careful about saying that politicians aren't in their prime.
You need to qualify. Are you talking about prime for like childbearing, or are you talking about prime for being president?
Smell Don's blood in the water.
Everybody at home. When is a woman in her prime? It says 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I'm just saying Nikki Haley should be careful about saying that politicians are not in their prime and they need to be in their prime when they serve, because she wouldn't be in her prime according to
Google
or whatever it is.
And then I think what we don't hear on there is Poppy Harlow getting up and storming off the stage as a result of that. That's a magical moment for Dick is another name for Richard Lemon. Don Lemon, who was on there. I just love it when the left reveals their true selves. I mean, this is a guy who, would beat his chest and beat the table mercilessly over the issue of equity or equality for women or whatever. And then when he's sitting there flanked on either side by 2 women who may have fallen out of their prime, according to Don Lemon, he goes right down that road, taking a shot at Nikki Haley. I think Nikki Haley's got to be thrilled with that in terms of getting some earned media off of that. And Don Lemon, goodbye, my friend. I think that hopefully will spell the end of his participation on the CNN network. We don't know, but you can hold out hope. Now, listen, my thanks to everybody that joined us today. Josh Sharf, Patty Calhoun from Westword, Josh Sharf with the Independence Institute. My thanks to also Commander Paul Jimenez from the new FIT team out there at DPD, Representative Matt Soper. Man, this was just chock full of guests, and we even had some calls. I couldn't get to everybody online today. With the final moments that I have left, though, I want to remind you to tune in. Special week next week for us here at 710, investing a great deal of effort into getting us down to El Paso, Texas, so that we can report to you from right there by the border everything that's going on there, but really, most importantly, the impact up here. We talk a lot about housing. We talk a lot about whether or not we should even lock people up in jail. We don't talk enough about immigration, and it's negative, the illegal immigration, negative impacts on the city of Denver and the surrounding parts of Colorado. We're going to put a spotlight on that next week. You stick around. Billy and I will be back on Monday. We just won't be in the same room. It's George Brockler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.